Welcome to God Tier Fanfiction. Today I'm gonna start a new series. What if Hokage Naruto was a guardian angel of Konoha? Part 1. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Light of early morning saw Kakashi reading a book before the campfire. The fire was dying, its last few embers going out. 3 tents had been pitched around the campfire, one for each person who had been on this journey. Behind him lay his own tent, and to his right, that of his oldest friend and foe, Might Guy. The one on his left was his bodyguard, Mirai Sarutobi. North of the Hidden Leaf Village, in the surrounding forest. A noise from within Mirai's tent pulled Kakashi's attention away from his book. A rustle of a tent flap opening announced the kunoichi emerging from the tent, dressed and ready. She'd probably been up about 15 minutes or so. Mirai stretched as she stepped into the cool morning air. Why do you always insist on going so slowly on these trips, Lord Hokage? We could have been at the final valley in less than a day if we really moved. We could, in fact, answered Kakashi. But I have spent enough of my life going as fast as I can. It's time to let a new generation take the reins. Right now I'm perfectly happy to just rest and take things gently. But, Lord Hokage, Mirai stopped and raised a hand. I told you before, you don't have to call me that. I'm retired from that role. Naruto's the Hokage now. Mirai folded her arms. And I have told you before, the Hokage is Hokage for life. You and Lady Tsunade are to be paid respect that your rank is due. Kakashi groaned, giving up on the subject, as it had happened many times before. Mirai, however, went to the fire and sat down, throwing more wood onto it and starting the business of making breakfast. Why are we going to the final valley anyway? Mirai said. Kakashi's eyes lifted from his reading. I've told you this before. This spot is significant to me. It's where Sasuke and Naruto's relationship was broken and reforged, where my team fell apart and then was put back together. But why do we keep going back there? Mirai insisted. There are so many sights to see, but we keep coming back to the same areas. Before Kakashi could answer Mirai's query, Guy walked out of his tent on his hands, his legs stretched in front of him. Guy had settled down rather well since he lost use of his right leg. Before the 4th Great Ninja War, he would have been the first one up, conducting some crazy training program, and trying to rope Kakashi into another one of their matches. Admittedly, the change of pace was good. But the price, the sacrifice of one of the world's best shinobi and probably the greatest taijutsu user in history, was steep. Morning, Guy, Kakashi murmured, not looking up from his book. Morning, Kakashi, Guy murmured, plopping himself down close to the fire. Mirai got up from her job. I'm simply gonna leave that one alone for now. I guess I'm gonna take a small walk. Once she was gone from the campfire, Guy went to Kakashi. I say this a lot, but she looks so much like her mother, it's incredible. And I think she knows that too, Kakashi answered. She makes a concerted effort to be like Asuna was. She wears her hair like his, bears his trench swords and jutsu. She even signed up to be part of the Hokage Guard squad to imitate Asuma joining the Guardian Shinobi 12. She is brilliant though, although precocious. Guy nodded. She is. But I quite agree with her in that you shouldn't be so contemptuous about the Hokage title. Kakashi stopped reading but didn't close the book. I am the least of the Hokage. My accomplishments are nothing compared to my peers. I never was able to surpass my teacher, and my students surpassed me. I believe in the end I was a placeholder between the last generation and the next. Guy flashed one of those smiles of his. Kakashi, my eternal rival, you're a great ninja. You're the only non-Uchiha to ever master the Mangekyo Sharingan. You were the youngest Genin, Chunin, and Jonin in the history of the Hidden Leaf. You were a unanimous choice for the 6th Hokage. Most importantly, I choose you as my rival. Seriously, get back to being the cool customer that always pissed me off so much. Kakashi smiled at that, a smile hidden behind his signature mask but did nothing to hide the fact that he was smiling. Thanks, Guy, he said, and returned to his reading. It was several minutes before Guy and Kakashi pulled the cooked food from the fire and began eating. Mirai came back, a small scroll in her hand. A missive from the village came with a message, Lord Hokage. Kakashi glanced up from his breakfast, mask still in place. What does it say? Mirai snapped to attention. Sir, we've received a message from the village hidden in the stones. The 3rd Tsuchikage, Onoki, has passed away. He died in his sleep of natural causes. The Lord 7th has requested that we return to the village. I see, murmured Kakashi, rose to his feet. Then we'd better get moving. We'll eat on the way. Mirai nodded, and silently went to assist Guy pack up, and get his wheelchair ready. Kakashi hurriedly put his own things away, doused the fire and began eating while Mirai and Guy completed getting ready. He could not help thinking of the news he had just received. Onoki was dead. There was something startling in that fact. Her death had been foreseen. Onoki was incredibly ancient, so old that he fought Madara Uchiha before he defected from the Hidden Leaf Village. He was over 90 years of age and bedridden. It was only a matter of time until he passed away. But there was something more here which puzzled him on some level. Kage was a career with a near 100% fatality rate, despite its might. They would be assassinated or killed in the protection of their village always. But they now lived in an age of extraordinary peace, with no wars to die in, no enemies to send assassins against. So this would be the first in a long line of Kage who die peacefully in their sleep in this period of peace. The main gates were always an experience to enter the hamlet through, framed by the gates and the village itself, with the Hokage monument easily in view. It was meant to remind visitors of the power that had safeguarded and was vested in this site, and also remind returning ninja that they might rest easy, for they were now under the protection of the Hokage. Kakashi stood at the gates, looking at the faces that were far away, his own face among them, the sun setting in the western sky. Mirai was handling the paperwork that went with coming and going from the village. Guy sat on the wheelchair she often used when they traveled together, waiting expectantly for her to finish. Once finished, Mirai went back to Kakashi, and as she got closer the Hokage spoke. "Mirai, take Guy home and report to Captain Genma." "Yes sir," said the guard. "Come on, Kakashi," Guy said, laughing and smiling. "You can't take me home, old rival?" Kakashi's eyes was fixed on the Hokage monument. "I'd love to, Guy, but I've got places to go." Guy's face grew sober as he recalled the reason they had returned to the village early. "Oh, right. See you, Kakashi." With that, Mirai and Guy set out towards the latter's flat. Kakashi stood still watching them depart. He watched them go, then turned to the gate guards. "Anything interesting happen while we were gone?" he inquired, nonchalantly snatching a clipboard the guards were keeping on their desk, though he didn't make any effort to actually read it. "Besides you and the news about the third Tsuchikage, the only noteworthy things were the arrival of Sasuke Uchiha and Lady Tsunade, both of which were anticipated," responded one of the on-duty shinobi. Kakashi nodded his head. "Okay. Thanks." Kakashi turned around, ready to walk inside the hamlet, but was halted before he could take a single step. Bolt Uzumaki pointed at the former Hokage in front of him. "Grandpa Kakashi, teach me a jutsu." Bolt was the firstborn child and only son of Naruto Uzumaki and Hinata Hyuga. He was 12 years old and extremely near to graduating from the academy. Bolt looked so much like his father it was staggering, especially when he was standing boldly in front of Kakashi like he was now. The only clearly seen thing to distinguish him from his father was a pair of whisker birthmarks on each cheek in place of 3, but if one looked closer they would see more of Hinata as well. Kakashi sighed and shut his eyes. "Bolt, it's getting kind of late, shouldn't you be home?" "I was staying with Grandpa Hiyashi," Bolt said, "but I came here to demand you teach me an awesome jutsu." He pointed at Kakashi again, as if to stress the point. The boy was passed by Kakashi. "Come on, Bolt. I don't have time for this. Let's get you home." The precocious Uzumaki lowered his head in defeat and meekly began to follow the older man. Kakashi began the walk toward the Hokage residence through the old village with Bolt at his side. The Hidden Leaf had developed during the Fourth Great Ninja War, the old village having been rebuilt after being destroyed by Pain and the new village extending from there with new buildings reaching high into the sky. When Kakashi arrived to the Hokage residence he was greeted in the lobby by Shizune, now the personal assistant to Naruto as she had been to Tsunade and to Kakashi before him. She led him to the Hokage's office, where he was already awaited. At the top of the steps leading up to the office, Kakashi bumped into Hinata. The former heiress to the Hyuga clan had been taken off active service following motherhood, but kept up her talents and training regiment. Most importantly, she had increased the effective range of her Byakugan to unbelievable distances and could now see the whole of the hamlet and a fair deal further in perfect clarity. Losing her children, or anybody else for that matter, was a fear that rarely touched Hinata. Hinata in a lavender kimono was the picture of quiet confidence and serenity, a long way from her youthful self. Her daughter, Himawari, stood at her side, 7 years old and more like her mother than Bolt was like their father. Except for a pair of sparkling blue eyes and whisker marks just like her brothers, she was no different than Hinata. Kakashi arrived within arm's length, and Himawari leapt from her mother's arms into the arms of the 6th Hokage, shouting, "Grandpa Kakashi." Kakashi moved fast, catching the child in midair. He chuckled. Hey there, little one, how are you? Himawari turned in his arms. Mommy was helping me get ready for academy next year. Ninja, ninja. She flung her arms up in the air, then did what looked like a ninjutsu hand sign. Kakashi laughed at it. Hinata grinned at the scene. Meanwhile Bolt crept up the steps and stood by his mother, who laid a hand on his shoulder. Thanks for bringing him home, Kakashi-sensei, but you didn't need to. No problem at all, Kakashi said with a huge smile that could be seen even through his mask as he got himself free of Himawari. I take whatever chance I get to meet these kids. He finished the endeavor and handed Himawari back to her mother. I'd love to stay but they are waiting for me, he remarked, gesturing behind his back towards the Hokage's office. Hinata started to herd her children towards the Hokage's apartments. I understand, Kakashi-sensei. See you later. The Uzumaki family went around the corner and Kakashi turned to continue down the corridor toward the office. The room was the same as it always was, a circular room with the Hokage's desk on the far side, underneath a bank of windows that looked out over the old village. Naruto sat at the desk wearing his white robe with his title on the back. His chief advisor Shikamaru sat on his right. An Anbu Black Ops member, Kakashi knew at a glance to be Yamato, although he wore the division cloak and mask, for Kakashi had himself named him division commander. To his left was Kakashi looked to his left and saw Sasuke slumped against a window, then to his right and saw Tsunade watching the proceedings from the far end of the room. When Kakashi entered the room everyone glanced up from what they were doing. Naruto grinned at his old teacher. Hey, Kakashi-sensei, we just finished catching Sasuke up with what's going on with the village's defensive situation. Naruto turned back to his longtime friend and foe. Then you're in charge of defending the village, and Shikamaru will handle the administration until I get back. Sasuke nodded in agreement, but he didn't look away from the window. Naruto reclined in his chair, his hands clasped beneath his chin. So, any news for us before you go? Kakashi gazed at Sasuke. Since the end of the Fourth Great Ninja War, the Uchiha had evolved drastically. He felt a strong sense of shame for the atrocities he had committed before that clash and felt a need to atone for his wrongdoings. Then he became a wanderer, going from place to place, defending the helpless and righting wrongs. He visited family and friends in the village from time to exchange news and information gleaned on his travels. The obvious is where I will start, Sasuke said, still staring out the window. The other 5 great shinobi nations are sending their kage to Onoki's funeral. Naruto looked highly annoyed by the remark. Yeah, we know that, we're going there too. There's a couple of other things you probably don't know, Sasuke said, and they bother me. Kakashi raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. Naruto made the same expression. Let me guess, Orochimaru? Kakashi had to admit defeat to his successor. Orochimaru had been offered a pardon by the International Society for his part in the Fourth Great Ninja War. In return the Sannin promised to never again use his banned immortality jutsu and the reanimation summons. Since then he had been working hard to convert the hidden sound into a legitimate shinobi hamlet and not a front for his criminal operations. He'd never caused any trouble in all his years, but with someone like Orochimaru, you never knew. Sasuke shook his head no, and turned his back to the window for the first time since Kakashi had entered the room. No, but it has something to do with Kabuto. Kakashi was not startled, and judging by his countenance neither was Naruto. Kabuto was pardoned after the war, like his old master, and gave up part of his banned jutsu. He later wandered the world much like Sasuke, using his medical ninja skills to treat people wherever he went. He was less dangerous than Orochimaru and a prospective threat, according to the general consensus, but he didn't have the resources of the entire shinobi village at his back, unlike his previous master. What did Kabuto do? Naruto wondered. Sasuke shook his head once again. Nothing he did. It's what he hasn't been doing. Usually, my travels bring me news of Kabuto, but it's been the other way around for the past several months. In fact, the only thing I've heard about him is that he's nowhere to be found. Sasuke shifted his eyes back to the window. But the worst news I bring comes from the village hidden in the rain. It has gone black. The last time I tried to get across the nation, I was refused entry and all information coming out of there has been cut off. Naruto looked over to Shikamaru. How do you feel about it? Slowly, Shikamaru closed his eyes and rubbed his goatee a few times. We don't have enough information to know what to do with this. We should try to find more out. I agree. Naruto nodded his head, turning to Yamato. Send Anbu teams to monitor our border with the Land of Rain. I want to essentially double our patrols in the area. Make sure it's done in a way that hides their presence, we don't want it to look like we're preparing an invasion ourselves. Understood, Yamato murmured, bowing, then disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruto looked at the remainder of the room. Okay Sasuke, if that's all you got then you and Shikamaru can leave. The two men left the room, Sasuke in a more quicker, purposeful way, Shikamaru in his customary laid-back style. Both of them departed the room, leaving the three Hokage alone. Naruto rose up and turned to face the old village below. Just like his father, Naruto's cloak billowed out behind him, with the flame design around the border, and the words, 7th Hokage, on the back. Naruto spun. You two know the plan. Tomorrow we go to the village hidden in the stones. We will take no guards and no personal assistance. This will be cage and cage only. Naruto strolled over to his predecessors and placed a hand on one of each of their shoulders, a wide, goofy grin on his face. Grandma Tsunade. Kakashi-sensei, it's great to see you guys again. The current Hokage left the room, leaving Kakashi and Tsunade alone. He's grown so much, hasn't he, Kakashi? Tsunade asked with a little smile on her face of pride. The sun was beginning to set over the western horizon and Kakashi was staring out the window at the dimming rays of light. Yes, his generation has truly taken over. He looked at Tsunade and smiled. Well, I think it is time to retire for the night. I bid you good night, Lady Hokage. Same to you. Kakashi left the office and Tsunade replied. The village hidden in the rain was dark. The rain after the conflict had founded the Council of Seven, the number 7 selected to indicate going beyond the leadership of Pain. It was only under Hanzo's rule that the rain had become this isolationist, which had allowed Pain to develop without the world at large realizing and then bringing down the hidden leaf. There was this horrible sense in the back of Kakashi's head, that there were heavy storm clouds on the horizon. Sasuke was standing outside his house. Well, it was his house in name only, he never stayed there longer than a week at a time. His family was in there, his pride, delight and biggest dread. They might be a nice ideal to think fondly of from afar, but up close they were one unpleasant circumstance after another. The entire time he had been in Naruto's office, he had been staring out the window in the direction the house was located, wondering how he was going to approach his wife and child this time. He unlocked the front door, groaned, and stepped into the entrance hall, opening it. Sasuke looked down outside the door and saw 2 pairs of sandals. Both of them were home. Sasuke took off his shoes and set his sword on the wall. He inhaled deeply and proceeded to stroll down the hall. The sound of running water in the kitchen brought him that way. He could see Sakura, now the head of the medical corp, doing dishes at the sink, his beloved daughter Sarada at the table with her schoolwork. He understood that his mental image of his little kid was a few years out of date, from just after she'd begun at the academy. She wondered if she'd matured, and if she had, maybe, awakened her Sharingan. His teeth clenched on the thought, a cocktail of exhilaration and dread. He thought about trying to peek through the walls with his Rinnegan for a second to check the situation with the sage eye. Sasuke placed his hand over his left eye and the moment was gone. He didn't need to regard a meeting with his family as a war with an enemy. Papa? He heard a little voice say. Sasuke looked at Sarada standing in the middle of the hall looking at him, shocked clear on her face. Mama, Mama. Sarada ran back into the kitchen, calling. Mama, Papa is here, he is home. Sasuke. The Uchiha heard his wife calling from the kitchen. Sasuke, over here. Sasuke took the few steps and turned the corner to the kitchen to see his wife in the doorway. The hands on Sakura's hips should have sent the, "What took you so long?" message, but the warm, understanding smile on her face softened the tone of that message. He saw his own concerns, his own reservations, fade gently away. They returned, and his gaze wandered to Sarada, across the table from him, her face alight with delight, amazement, and expectancy. Sasuke walked up to the table and sat down trying to think of what to say to his daughter. Hey Sarada, how's school? He finally asked, not knowing what else to say. She'd been performing well the previous time Sasuke was in the hamlet, top of her class, showing off the all-around talent that was expected of Uchiha. Sarada took her eyes off Sasuke and sat down across from her father. The kid looked like Sasuke if she was born a girl, except for her mom's big forehead. Strangely enough, Sarada had bad eyesight and needed glasses. None of the Uchiha he had known had worn glasses, and of course they were famous for the Sharingan. Where that came from he didn't know, but stranger things have happened. Sarada gazed at the table. School's going well, Papa. Sasuke was beginning to worry if he had said something wrong, but Sarada gazed back up at him with a certain determination in her eyes. Papa, teach me the fireball jutsu please? Sasuke blinked in surprise at the question. When he initially found that Sakura was pregnant, he was overjoyed at the thought of teaching the child everything he knew about being Uchiha. However, he reconsidered the nature of the Uchiha talents and the curse of hatred, and opted against ever teaching Sarada anything, secretly hoping that she would never awaken the Sharingan. But his daughter looked at him with hope and he couldn't help but say yes. Sarada's eyes expanded, joy spreading across her face. Then she gathered herself, stood and bowed to Sasuke. "Thanks, Papa. I'm sure you're glad to see me, but your father is probably very tired after his journey," Sakura cut in. "You've got a long day tomorrow anyway, and so have I, so you'd better get to bed." "Yes, Mama," Sarada answered. Sakura up and silently left the room, leaving her daughter alone. Sakura then stepped up to Sasuke with a glass of water. "Thanks," murmured Sasuke, bringing his hand to his face. "I didn't know what to say after." "You did well. Besides, I think some father-daughter time would do you both good," Sakura replied, laying the glass in front of Sasuke. "She misses you like anything." "All right." Sasuke relented, taking the water. "Anything else I should know?" he inquired and put the glass to his lips. Sakura's features broke into a naughty smile. "Looks like Sarada has a little crush." One of Sasuke's eyebrows went up as he stopped his drink to inquire. "Who?" He didn't know why he asked this. He didn't know many of the children in the hamlet. Sakura stepped close and whispered in Sasuke's ear. "Bolt Uzumaki." Sasuke threw the drink back on the table, trying to swallow the water that was still in his mouth. That was one of the few kids he knew. "Yeah," answered Sakura. "I had a pretty similar reaction." She got up and walked out into the hall, rotating her body so as to flaunt off every curve. "Come on, Sarada hasn't been the only one missing you." She disappeared around the corner toward the bedroom. Sasuke got to his feet and followed, with one of his rare smiles on his face. Sand and Leaf Tamari stood in her son's bedroom with her hands on her hips and a painful look on her face. The room was a mess, the result of negligence over a number of weeks. She had told him to clean the room the day before and it seemed as if he hadn't moved a finger to do so. That kid and his laziness, I swear. Apparently Shikadai had acquired the indolent Nara feature. It seemed to come part and parcel with all the other Nara traits. Shikadai had his father's hair, body type, brains, even his slightly problematic attitude towards women, with the sloth. At first Tamari had believed it was a curious coincidence that Shikamaru looked so much like his father, but now that she had given birth to Shikadai, she wasn't so sure. The art of avoiding labor was one of the few things father and son had in common. Shikamaru did it by not giving a fuck, by being distant. Shikadai, however, skirted accountability by being overly cocky and disdainful of authority. And his green eyes were probably the only effects Temari's genes have had on the Nara male equation. Tamari decided some punishment was in order and left the room to find her son. She figured the lad would be sunbathing on the balcony, so she headed there and quickly found that she was right. Shikadai rested on the bench on the balcony, eyes closed, idly spinning a piece of straw in his mouth, intentionally facing the sinking sun so that it would cast a shadow on his face. Tamari stopped in the doorway back inside the house. "Shikadai, go clean up your room." Shikadai didn't even open his eyes. "Nah, I don't think I'll do it, Mom." Tamari crossed the ground to the bench, bending over the youngster. "Shikadai, tidy your room. Actually, considering I told you to do it yesterday and you didn't, do it everything twice." Shikadai blinked one eye open. "Mother." Tamari let a little venom creep into her voice. "Shikadai, go do what I ordered you to do or I'll get my fan and make a greater mess for you to clean up." Shikadai dragged himself to his feet. "Okay, Mom, geez," he murmured and proceeded to his bedroom. Tamari sat on the bench and sighed. What had caused her to have such a lackadaisical family? She laughed at herself for it. She loved her family more than she ever thought she could, no matter how much they drove her up the wall. Soon she was observing the clouds that shone in the orange glow of the setting sun. Watching the clouds was Shikamaru's favorite hobby, and Tamari had grown to realize over the years why. It brought with it a certain measure of calm. A moment's whimsy and Tamari was up and walking over to the railing, staring down at the street below. Just then, Shikamaru walked around the corner, back after another hard day at the workplace. Tamari adjusted her black kimono and proceeded to meet him at the entrance. Shikamaru had just entered, and was in the process of removing his sandals when Tamari entered the entrance hall. He looked up as she came into view. "Hey you, where's our son?" Tamari put a hand on her hip and a smirk spread across her face. "He's up there, cleaning his room. I swear, it's a marvel you Nara men ever get anything done." Shikamaru finished with his footwear. He laughed at the remark. Because we always marry nagging women who always push us around. Temari looked at him with a mask of fake wonder. Really, I would like to meet that woman. Shikamaru embraced his wife and planted a gentle kiss on her lips. Why, of course. I'll introduce you to her. They went into the living room and sat down on the couch, arms around each other, feet up on the footrest in front of them. Shikamaru reached for the remote and turned on the TV. He flipped it to some inconspicuous station, and the noises filled the room and became background noise. Temari leaned her head on her husband's shoulder. So Naruto is traveling to the hidden stone. With his eyes closed, Shikamaru nodded. Yeah. He's leaving the village defenses to Sasuke, but all the rest he's throwing on me. What a burden. Yes, but you will do it because you are such a hard-working little man. Temari replied, rubbing Shikamaru on the chest. Shikamaru caressed his wife's arm with a fond gesture. If you think that way, you must have married the wrong person. They lay there like that for quite a while, the two of them. Temari thought to herself that she wouldn't trade this for anything. It had seemed such an odd coupling at the start, but it had turned out to be exquisite, this blending of sand and leaf. Cracks in the armor. Hinata. Hinata sat at the table in the kitchen. Naruto had missed another family meal, working late into the day. His dinner lay in the refrigerator waiting for him. She heard the door inside the flats open, and knew the wait for the food, and for her, was over. He walked into the kitchen, now free of his robe, got his meal from the refrigerator, microwaved it, and sat down across from Hinata. Kids in bed? Naruto inquired while he began to eat. Hinata nodded confirmation. Yep. Himawari's out cold. I think I managed to wear her out today. Bolt's supposed to be asleep too, but he's studying for the graduation exam, so I'll let him be. Naruto nodded. Naruto kept eating and they sat in silence for a few moments, and then Hinata spoke up. You know, I think Bolt would benefit from spending more time with you. Naruto glanced up from his food. I know, the pranks he does, they're just ways to attract my attention. It's not just that, Hinata remarked. He constantly bothering other people to teach him. He probably attempted to force my father and Kakashi-sensei to teach him jutsu today alone because you don't have the time to do it yourself. Yeah, Naruto said. And what do you want me to do about it? Hinata stopped for a moment. Just make more time for him, and for Himawari too. Naruto forgot about his dinner and put his head in his hands. I would if I could, but I'm just too busy. My calendar is too booked for that. Hinata placed a hand on Naruto's cheek. You put too much stress on yourself, you need this too. Naruto shook his head, and Hinata took her hand away. No, I'm the hero. The one everyone expects to save the day. I can't afford to slack, to fail, to disappoint them. Hinata got up and came around the table to sit next to her husband. She threw her arms around his shoulders. But before she could say anything, he spoke. Sometimes I wonder why I wanted to be Hokage. Hinata squeezed Naruto's hand. You became Hokage because you wanted everyone to recognize you, and because you wanted to protect us all. Naruto laughed. Yes, he murmured, his smile far away and wistful. Naruto rose up, placed the half-eaten dinner in the sink and left the room. He walked away, Hinata observed. The world was watching. But she was the only one who could see. Naruto was starting to reveal some flaws in the armor. Hinata lay awake in her bed. She tilted her head left and saw her sleeping spouse as the early morning light climbed over his face. Today was the day Naruto would start his journey to the hidden stone. 3 days to get there, 1 day for the funeral and short cage summit, 3 days back. A whole week out of the village, back just in time for the academy graduation exam. He was departing after their discussion about him having to spend more time with their kids, but they couldn't do anything. That was Hokage's job. The light hit Naruto's eyes and they opened. Wah, it's morning already? Yes, Hinata replied. We should be leaving soon. Naruto got out of bed. I'm taking the first shower. Hinata watched him go into the next bathroom. The Hokage were departing early in the morning, but that was no reason not to see their father off for the kids. She got out of bed and threw on a robe over her nightgown and went out into the hallway. Her first stop was in Himawari's room, where she slipped stealthily through the door and across to the child's bed, giving her a gentle shake to rouse her. Himawari's eyes slowly opened and she dragged herself into a sitting position. What's wrong, mommy? Hinata massaged her daughter's back tenderly. You want to come down and see daddy off on his trip? Himawari looked at her mother and smiled idiotically. Yes, she said, sinking backwards, back to sleep. Hinata grinned and made her way back out to the hallway, walking over to Bolt's room. She crawled over to his bed like she did with Himawari's, but when she reached down to shake him awake, he spoke. I'm not going. Bolt was lying on his side, away from Hinata. "Why not?" she said. "He hasn't got time for me, so why should I have time for him?" Bolt remarked with a little disgust in his voice. Hinata sighed and sat on the side of the bed. "This is your last chance to see your dad for an entire week, you know." Bolt sat up cross-legged, his back still to his mother. "Fine, I'll come," he responded after a short pause, sliding out of bed and grabbing some clothes before he strolled out into the corridor, headed towards the bathroom. Hinata was scared about what she had just seen, but there wasn't much she could do about that at the moment. She went back to the master bedroom to see Naruto putting on his robe, his hat on the bed. He turned to face Hinata. "Oh, there you are. How are you doing?" Hinata walked towards the bathroom to take her shower. "The kids are here to see you off. Himawari probably needs waking up again." "I'll go get her when I'm done packing," Naruto responded, kneeling to put some last-minute items into a backpack. Hinata went into the bathroom and shut the door behind her. She stripped off her robe and nightgown and turned on the water for a lovely hot shower. The water poured over her body as she stood there, wrestling in her head with the same conundrum that she had been struggling with for some time now. How does she persuade Naruto to spend more time with the kids? There was no easy answer to this situation. Finally, she dismissed the thought from her thoughts, and began the process of cleansing herself. Naruto had already gone to check on Himawari as she came out of the shower. Hinata was changed into clean garments, a white kimono with gold accents. She put her long hair into a bun and went to see how the rest of the family was doing. She found them waiting at the front entrance ready to go. Naruto had his normal clothes on with his white robe over them, and his cap was hanging from his neck and over his rucksack. In a yellow t-shirt and crimson skirt, Himawari sat by the entrance, singing joyfully to herself. Bolt sat in the corner sulking, a black tracksuit over a white t-shirt, playing with his lightning bolt necklace. "Okay, here we go," Naruto said, hoisting Himawari up so he was carrying her on his shoulders, the girl laughing joyously. Hinata grinned. That was the kind of thing that should happen more often. Naruto carried Himawari on his shoulders, with Hinata walking next to him and Bolt trailing after them all as they exited the apartment. The trek to the main gate was swift, where Tsunade and Kakashi were waiting for them. The Uzumakis moved forward, and Kakashi looked up from his book. "You are late." Naruto smiled at it. "That's rich, Kakashi-sensei." His predecessors had already done the paperwork, so Naruto got to work saying farewell to his family. He put Himawari down from his shoulders and hugged her close. "Bye, Daddy. See you next week," she exclaimed, waving as he set her down. Then Naruto approached Bolt. The youngster hugged his father wordlessly and reluctantly. When Naruto and Hinata had their goodbye hug and kiss, she only whispered in his ear, "Be safe." He waved bye with a large silly grin on his face as he went out of the village with Kakashi and Tsunade. Hinata beckoned to them when the children were out of sight. "Let's go," she remarked and took them away from the gates. "Will we see Uncle Neji?" Himawari asked, looking first in the direction of the family's residence, which was not the direction they were going, and then in the direction they were going, towards the large graveyard that was the resting place for many of the village's heroes. Hinata nodded. "Yeah. Every time Naruto left the village for long stretches, she would go to Neji's tomb to pay her respects and ask him to watch over Naruto. But as they approached the spot, she started to feel that something was wrong. Hinata stopped at the cemetery entrance, eyes darting back and forth, though she hadn't yet activated her Byakugan. "Mom?" Bolt looked to his mother. Hinata activated her Byakugan and put out her hand in front of her children. He caught his sister's wrist and pulled her behind him. Hinata's eyes didn't move significantly, but she glanced at the child behind her before focusing on the field of graves in front of her. She grimaced to see a man standing over Neji's grave, staring at the marker. Her eyes widened in amazement as he sank down towards Neji's body as if by some type of earth ninjutsu, slipping down into the ground before rising. "Stay here," Hinata replied in a low, serious voice. Bolt hesitated. Then he nodded, drawing Himawari closer to him. The former Hyuga heiress was rushing ahead towards the unknown figure. A masculine one, she could now see, clad all in black with no identifying features showing. As Hinata drew closer, the intruder turned to face her, no doubt alerted by the rustle of the damnable kimono she had decided to wear that morning, she thought to herself. The element of surprise lost, she cried out, 8 trigrams, air palm. The man was knocked back several feet as he was smacked with a fist-sized packet of chakra infused in compressed air. Hinata, hampered by her kimono, leapt to strike at her opponent. Except when her blow fell, she struck nothing except the dirt. Her Byakugan searched the area, but he couldn't be found anywhere around. Had he gone to the kids? No, not at all. She concentrated her chakra to her eyes and started scanning for other spots further distant. Then she located him miles to the north, already traveling rapidly away from the village. There was no way she could catch him now. Hinata made her way back to the entrance of the cemetery with a purpose in her step, having forgotten her original reason for coming totally. "Mommy?" asked Himawari as Hinata lifted her up. "Come," murmured Hinata, beginning to stroll back into the village. Her son hesitated a while and went after her, but Hinata didn't care much what he was thinking right at that moment. She had to inform Shikamaru what just had transpired. Someone would pay for this sin. One of the many training fields strewn about the Hidden Leaf village was a tiny lake, with a pier extending out from the bank into the water. Sasuke was sitting meditating at the edge of this platform. It was a secluded and calm place, the perfect place to practice some fire jutsu. He had gone out of the home at morning, with a note for Sarada to come and meet him here as soon as she was ready. It was late morning now, and Sasuke heard footsteps stepping off the grassy soil at the water's edge, and onto the wooden planks of the pier. "I'm here, Papa," Sarada said, but Sasuke knew before she said anything. The senior Uchiha rose up and spun around in one fluid move to face his daughter. She was standing at the end of the pier, watching him expectantly. Not the hungry enthusiasm he'd had for learning fire style in order to be able to equal Itachi, but a frightened want to impress her father. "Sarada, do you know what the fireball jutsu means?" inquired Sasuke. Sarada shook her head. "No, I was talking to Grandpa Kakashi and he told me about how you mastered the fireball jutsu before you left the academy, how it was a mainstay for you." I see," Sasuke murmured, placing his hand on his chin. "Then let me explain it to you. The fireball jutsu is not just some technique. In our clan it is a rite of passage. Being able to perform this jutsu means that you are ready for adulthood and that you are worthy of the name Uchiha." Sarada tilted her head slightly to the side, her brow furrowing as if she was peering at a warped mirror. "Then why haven't you taught me, if it's so important?" Sasuke took a few steps forward and knelt so he was facing Sarada eye to eye, his own showing in equal measure feelings of regret and anguish. "Sarada, I have been reluctant to teach you the ways of the Uchiha and I apologize for that. But I swear, all will be revealed to you eventually." Sarada stared back for a few moments, then nodded her confirmation. Sasuke stood up once again and proceeded towards the edge of the pier. "I will do the jutsu once, to show you what you must strive for. After that you are on your own. When you believe that you have mastered it properly, show it to me." Sarada chose a spot in front and to the left of her father to watch the jutsu. In his last fight with Naruto, Sasuke had lost his left hand and couldn't make the hand signs of the technique, but he didn't need to. Sasuke merely inhaled, gathering the chakra in his chest, and as he exhaled he roared, "Fire style, fireball jutsu," letting the energy out of his mouth as flame. Sasuke let out his breath, trying not to add too much chakra to the jutsu, and the flames flickered and danced across the surface of the water. Didn't want Sarada creating it more powerful than she could control. He let go of the technique and the flames faded out on the surface of the water. Sasuke turned halfway to Sarada. "The signs are snake, ram, monkey, boar, horse and tiger. You gather the chakra in your chest, then draw it up to your mouth. When you release it, convert it to fire. This technique relies on change in chakra nature, so it requires a significant amount of energy and skill, so don't be discouraged if you don't get it immediately." He pointed at his own chest, mimicking the path that the chakra would have to take as he explained the process. Sarada nodded understandingly as Sasuke turned and walked back to shore. He sat in a patch of grass, watching his daughter attempt the fireball jutsu. Sasuke expected her to make a very small quantity of flame, maybe a small handheld lighter. The older Uchiha closed his eyes, remembering his first trials and how his father had sighed and walked away when he had made similar progress. A bird alighted on his right shoulder and interrupted his ruminations. Sasuke opened his eyes and looked at the bird. It was produced from ink, thus obviously it was not a natural-born species. "What do you want, Sai?" Sasuke inquired out loud. The moment the bird was spoken out loud, it began to fall to pieces. The lines which had made up the shape of an animal began to break down and rebuild themselves into completely alien shapes, the shapes of letters and words. After a moment they started to read a message. "Sasuke, there's a dozen unknowns with something big heading to the main gates. I need you on the scene now." Sasuke had wanted to spend more time with Sarada, but duty called. Sasuke stood up and summoned his daughter. "Sarada, you should head home. Have your mother check you for burns and get some rest. Don't want you to fall from chakra exhaustion." Sarada paused her weaving of the hand signs for another try, and turned to look back at Sasuke. A flicker of disappointment crossed her face for a minute, then she started down the pier. She reached the shore and stopped, turning back to Sasuke and bowing to him. "Thank you, Papa." Sasuke watched his daughter go away in the direction of home. For a moment he felt a twinge of shame and pity, but the situation at the gate demanded his attention. He gathered chakra in his legs and ran as fast as he possibly could towards the gates. A moment later, he stood at the top of the gate with Sai, now the ANBU's second in command, and 3 of his subordinates. Sai pointed down at the woodland around the village. "They're there now." There were indeed, a dozen guys all looking to be shinobi of the hidden rain, lugging some enormous object between them. The apparent leader, probably a Jonin from his attire, was walking in front of the main throng. Sai turned to Sasuke. "What's your game?" Sasuke thought about it, looking down at the gathering. "I go straight toward them, 2 of you on either side of me. The other 2 will fan out into the woods and get into position on either side of the group. Don't strike the first blow. If we have to fight, it will be in self-defense." Sasuke then hopped down to meet the newcomers. In less than a moment he stood before them with his hand lightly resting on his blade. The foreign shinobi was not afraid, he just stopped. Sasuke could feel the Anbu taking their places. "My name is Sasuke Uchiha. You are entering our village without any warning. State your business or you will be taken for an enemy." The head of the rain shinobi moved forward and with more flair than one would expect from a salesman spoke to Sasuke. "My lord Uchiha, we come to your fine village with a gift. The remains of one of your greatest heroes, the Toad Sage and one of the legendary Sannin, Jiraiya. We make this gift as a sign of continuing friendship and deepest admiration." With that said, the man stepped to the side to let what Sasuke could now see was a coffin come forward, carried by 3 men on either side. They carefully put it on the ground, and the whole contingent, without a word, headed away from the settlement. Sasuke remained where he was for a bit, slightly confused. During the 4th Great Ninja War, Jiraiya was one of the few major shinobi not to be revived by Kabuto. As such, it was assumed his body was destroyed or lost following his death at the hands of Pain. Yet here it was purportedly now. Sasuke activated his Sharingan and started searching the box for traps. Sasuke saw nothing wrong with this, and looked to Sai, who had come up beside him. He turned off his Sharingan and stated, "Check the coffin for any nasty surprises. If it checks out, send it to the medical corp." That said, Sasuke turned to travel back to the village. This sudden turn of events had bewildered him, but if this was really the body of Jiraiya, then Naruto would probably be glad for this gift. Shikamaru moved through the Hokage mansion slowly and deliberately. It was early morning on the first day of his week as Hokage in all but name, and frankly, he was not looking forward to it. There was no way around it, unfortunately. Just because the Hokage wasn't around didn't mean the village stopped running. Assuming there were no delays, the Hokage should already be on their way. Which meant Shikamaru, the stand-in, has officially begun his rule. Shikamaru walked into the Hokage's office and stopped to gaze out the window at the village, taking in the view as he tried to plot out his first day. He caught the back of the chair with a sigh and began to lower himself into what was ordinarily Naruto's seat, for the moment. It was at that moment that Hinata burst into the room. Shikamaru's eyes darted reflexively from the Hokage's wife to the rest of the room, trying to garner whatever information he could on whatever issue was now at hand. Her kimono was in an unusual state of disarray. Her breathing was shallow and fast. Some of it, Shikamaru was sure, was from the running and the physical exertion, but there was an emotional undercurrent to it, too. His analysis had ran out of data to work with, and at last he spoke. "What's wrong, Hinata? Did something happen at the gates?" Hinata drew a deep breath, hand clutching her collarbone, visibly stabilized herself. "No, this was something else. I ran into a grave robber at Neji's grave." Shikamaru's brow lifted in unison, curiosity piqued. "What, you want to start from the beginning?" "Right," began Hinata. "I took the kids to see Naruto off on his journey. After that I took them to the cemetery to pay respects to Neji and ask him to watch over Naruto while he's traveling, like I always do when he leaves the village. When we got there we found a man at the gravesite." Hinata paused, her fist clenching as her emotions came back. This man invaded Neji's resting place. Hinata pounded her palms on the desk and stared Shikamaru in the eyes. Shikamaru stared into the blank Byakugan of the erstwhile heiress of Hyuga and could only think of it as a peaceful serenity masking a boiling pool of rage. He nodded in reply and sat back in his chair. "Okay, Hinata, I'll take a look." A few hours later Shikamaru sat in the office, pencil and notebook in his hands. With him in the room was Hinata, who looked way cleaner than she had earlier that morning, the leader of the Anbu investigation unit and a ninja from the medical corp. Shikamaru set his notebook down on the desk. So what have we found for leads? The first to speak was the Anbu member. Sir, we checked the village and the outside. We discovered no indication of the man. When I fought him, he escaped by moving almost 10 miles in almost no time, Hinata stated. I told you, Shikamaru, it was probably already far out of our reach. Shikamaru nodded in agreement. He looked to the Anbu and asked, did you discover any witnesses other than Hinata? The Anbu shook his head in reply. Shikamaru put his hand on his chin in thought. So then we have to assume this person is very good at infiltration. Hinata, do you have any other information we could use to profile him? Hinata agreed with a nod. The man had Earth-style ninjutsu, and he was quite skilled at it. This was how he was able to go inside Neji's grave and to leave, fusing with the ground and then moving through at fast speed. Shikamaru took some notes on what they had talked and looked at the Anbu member. We don't have nearly enough information to even think about trying to identify him, but we have some idea of his abilities. Inform all squad leaders of this and that finding him or information concerning him is considered a top priority. The Anbu bowed and then disappeared in a puff of smoke. Shikamaru faced the medical nin. Have they finished examining the gravesite? The medical shinobi nodded. Yes, my lord, sir. Shikamaru chose to ignore that. Less difficulty that way. What have you inferred? The medical ninja squirmed a bit, glancing over at Hinata. Well, sir, nothing in a word. This took Shikamaru by surprise. Nothing? You're positive? The man nodded his head. Sir, I went to the site myself. The body is indeed that of Neji Hyuga and shows the expected level of decomposition. Nothing was taken from the site, nor was anything added. As far as we can tell, it has been undisturbed since it was interred there. I doubt this grave robber touched the body. Hinata turned to face the medic. She added, without any animosity, wait, are you suggesting that I'm making this up? The medic folded his arms. Not necessarily, but all the evidence points to this not ever having happened other than your own eyewitness story. Sigh, said Shikamaru. I believe Hinata's eyes and more importantly I believe her. If she says something's wrong then something's wrong. The medical ninja bowed to Shikamaru. Yes, sir. Then he turned to Hinata and spoke again. Pardon me, my lady. Shikamaru snatched up a piece of paperwork put over to the side, irrelevant, before the meeting began. We aren't going to get much further on this and I have plenty of other things to do. You are both excused. The medical ninja nodded, turned on his heels and walked out of the office. Hinata, however, was still standing fixed to the spot. Yeah, Hinata? Shikamaru said. Anything else? The Hyuga shook her head. No, she replied. Just. Thank you, for all of it. Not a word, said Shikamaru. It was just afternoon, and Shikamaru was slogging his way through yet more paperwork when there was a knock on the office door. Get in here, Shikamaru yelled. The door swung open and Shizune stuck her head through the door. Instead of greeting, the Nara stated, I hope you have lunch for me. I'm beginning to get a bit hungry. Something we'll have to wait for, Shikamaru, said Shizune. Message recently received from the medical corp. Your presence is desired in the hospital. Shikamaru sighed. Okay, I'm going. Did they mention why by any chance? Shizune shook her head. No, they just wanted you to come. Shikamaru got up. Okay, I'm going. Shizune moved by Shikamaru. I could get you something to eat after you return. That'd be excellent, thanks, Shikamaru said. Just get whatever would be most convenient. Shikamaru walked the streets trying to figure out what could be so urgent for the medical corp to send for him. Another plague? A germ weapon? Shikamaru shook his head, knowing that trying to fill in too many blanks could get him into danger. In the lobby of the hospital Shikamaru saw Sasuke, Sai and Sakura waiting for him. What is it? Is something wrong? Sai, Sakura and Sasuke looked blankly at each other. We don't know actually. Sasuke took on where Sai left off. Earlier morning a huge troop of rain shinobi arrived in the hamlet. We fought them back, and they departed, but Jiraiya's body was not with them. Shikamaru's eyes grew big. Jiraiya? You're kidding me? Sasuke nodded in return. We had the casket and body checked for traps and whatever but it was all clear. Shikamaru was still perplexed. Did you say it was ninja from the rain village? I thought you said they had gone dark. I did, and they have. Sasuke responded. As far as I know this is the first they've had communication with anybody in weeks, maybe months. Before Shikamaru could begin to comprehend this information, Sakura spoke up. There's something strange about the body, too. Come and look. With that, Sakura turned around and began to walk towards the morgue, encouraging the others to follow. Sakura came to the morgue, pulled open a drawer and slid out a table. The body perched on top, covered, and sure enough it was tall enough to be the Toad Sage. Sakura peeled back the cover in silence. Shikamaru stared at it for a bit, attempting to figure out what he was looking at. The body looks like it's been dead for a few months. Sakura nodded in agreement and put a hand on the table. Right, this isn't the kind of decomposition that you'd expect after almost 15 years of exposure. This would be typical of 2 to 4 months, depending on exact conditions. But this isn't the result of simple preservation. On closer inspection, it seems as if the flesh has been renewed. At last, when he was totally free of the body, Shikamaru gazed at Sakura. Renewed? What do you mean? How? The body's cells show evidence of recent division and growth, but this should have ceased after death, Sakura explained. My theory is that someone used chakra to cause the cells to regenerate and multiply, renewing the flesh and reversing the decomposition process. It's not too dissimilar to the ninja art. Meiotic regeneration that Lady Tsunade and myself use, though with an added dimension of difficulty added, as the cells are first temporarily brought back to life. Shikamaru listened, absorbed this information, before asking, is this jutsu beyond the reach of ordinary medical ninja? Sakura nodded. Probably the most advanced medical jutsu I've ever seen. Myself and Lady Tsunade could probably pull it off, as well as Kabuto. A few others might have the prerequisite skill, but if there is a fourth person to add to that list, it's likely that we simply don't know who they are. Kabuto. Shikamaru turned to Sasuke. You mentioned he's missing, right? Sasuke nodded his head. He's been gone for months, but it's hard to put a specific date on it. Shikamaru put a hand to his chin. He could be working with the hidden rain, but we really don't know. Sai came off. Sir, what do you want to do with this? Thinking. Shikamaru put his hands on his temples. The body itself is no threat to us, keep it here for the moment. As to the rain village, we can't do anything. As far as the public is concerned, they simply made a gesture of friendliness, we can't repay them with mistrust and aggression. Sai answered, so our orders are to wait. Shikamaru dropped his hands to his sides. Yes. He was sitting in the office and had caught himself thinking what a troublesome day it had been, and it was barely halfway through. First the grave robbing incident, then the rain ninja and the return of Jiraiya's remains. Both raised more questions than they answered and both frightened and irritated Shikamaru. Something was going on, but until they had a better idea what it was they could do nothing. Shikamaru was pulled out of his thoughts by a knock on the door. Shikamaru. He heard Shizune say. There's a messenger from the village hidden in the sound. The stand-in Hokage stood up and yelled, bring him in. Shizune unlocked the door and stepped through. Behind her came someone who looked like a Jonin from the hidden sound, backed by 2 members of the Anbu. The messenger stood right in the middle, with his escort beside him as Shizune took up a position to Shikamaru's left. Shikamaru adjusted his shirt slightly, wanting to look official. So what's this message you're bringing? The sound ninja stared at Shikamaru for a bit. Sorry sir, but I was advised to only give this message to the Hokage, no one else. Huh, Shikamaru responded. Well, I understand, but the Hokage isn't here at the moment and won't be back until a week from now. The sound ninja loosened his stance. Then I suppose I will simply have to wait till he returns. Are you sure? Inquired Shikamaru. Do you really have to wait a week? This message is to be delivered to the Hokage, the sound ninja stated, and the Hokage only. Shikamaru decided to fish out what info he could. Nothing at all you can tell us, maybe some news. The messenger hesitated. I suppose I could. The village hidden in the sound has been assaulted. Shikamaru didn't have the strength to respond with shock or surprise, but Shizune was biting down on a gasp. It was that kind of a hard day. You say attacked. The sound ninja nodded his head. One man assaulted the village. Nothing we did even scratched him. Lord Orochimaru gave me this message before he went to confront the enemy, hoping to buy time for an evacuation to take place. We managed to evacuate the civilian population with minimal casualties, but Lord Orochimaru is presumed Kia. That was enough news to astonish Shikamaru even on a day like today. I see. Shikamaru waved to the Anbu and said, take this man and give him some lodging. Looks like he's going to be staying for at least a week. The Anbu nodded and escorted the sound ninja out of the room. Shizune gazed at Shikamaru. Thoughts? Don't know, Shikamaru replied. With Orochimaru you never know what to anticipate. Send an Anbu unit to observe the situation in the hidden sound. Besides that, there isn't much we can do until Naruto returns. Shizune nodded and left to go get that recon squad together. But before she could get to the door, Shikamaru cried out to her. Shizune, I guess I'm about ready to pack it in for the day. I'll do a bit more paperwork and then go home, spend some time with the family. Tsunade's former apprentice nodded and left. Everyone who worked at the Hokage residence was exhausted after all that had happened today. Shikamaru picked up a nearby piece of paper which just so happened to be the roster for the next class coming out of the academy. He smiled as he looked at the paper. The next generation was getting ready to take over, but the current one's job was not done yet. Askia jolted awake from his restless sleep. He did what he had done several times previously tonight. He turned over in his bed and peered at the digital clock on the nightstand. Morning, huh? Oh, come on, he groaned to himself, breaking the pattern of the middle-of-the-night version of this process. He sat up in his bed and took a deep breath. He never did like sleeping in underground compounds, least of all after returning from a mission like the one he had just completed in the Leaf Village. Trying to push those thoughts out of his head, he pushed on with his morning tasks. Askia completed his preparations and left his room, proceeding through the deserted corridors of the compound to the audience chambers. When he reached them, he entered the small waiting room preceding the chamber itself, and seated himself in the chair that had been left in the middle of the room. He frowned upon hearing a voice from behind him. Well, Askia Fong, you are not dead. Askia looked round to see who had spoken. It was a young, good-looking man, slim-built, resting against the wall near the door. The scowl that was his mouth was twisted to serve to mar his handsome face. Askia looked at him for a moment. Tadashi, of all people you should know it takes an awful lot to kill me. I don't know about that. Tadashi shrugged his shoulders. After all, it was me his lordship chose to go with him on his expedition, while you sent off all by your lonesome. Speaking of which, Askia said, where did you go? Tadashi shook a finger and tsked. Now, Askia. You and I both know the master doesn't like agents discussing among themselves about their escapades. Well, my exploits, you have probably no such thing to speak of. Finally, Askia had enough of his displeasure with Tadashi. He hauled the arrogant guy up by the collar and pulled him close to his face. You idiot. I have served the village hidden in the rain faithfully for years with an outstanding record. I served under Lord Payne, even under those fools on the Council of Seven. I've been around too long for you to doubt me. Tadashi grinned and snorted. Oh really? Why don't you prove it? The door to the audience chamber suddenly opened, yet there was no one in sight that could have opened it. Instead, a voice shouted out from within the room. Askia. Tadashi. Stop this now. I can't have my right hand and left hand trying to murder each other. Askia released go of Tadashi. Again the voice boomed out of the audience hall. Good. Now Askia, come in and make your report. Askia entered the audience chamber, the door sealing behind him as he entered. A spotlight illuminated the shinobi as he knelt on the ground. At the back was the silhouette of a man sitting on a raised platform, behind a thin curtain that obscured his features. A man known only as the Master. He had risen to power in the Hidden Rain a few months ago, overthrowing the Council of Seven in a bloodless coup. No one knew who exactly he was or where he came from. The only things that were known about him were that he was powerful and that he claimed to be an agent of peace, a claim that most of the village believed, including Askia. Askia heard the clink of a teacup set down behind the curtain. Tell me of your mission to the Hidden Leaf, Askia. Did you get that? I did, my lord. Asked Askia. I brought back a sample of Neji Hyuga's DNA, as you requested. Askia rose up and walked a few paces forward. He set a little vial on the floor and stepped back to his knees. The master waved his hand and the vial floated through the curtain to him. Askia, did you encounter any complications? Askia winced. He wasn't accustomed to screwing up assignments like this. Yes, my lord. I was caught in the act of getting the sample. The Hidden Leaf knows what I did, but they do not know the motive or my identity. The master was silent for a few moments. Well, that's too bad. Not an issue though. A soft noise of glass against stone as the vial was set down. Askia, how are you? Are you sleeping well? Askia's eyes dilated in amazement. My lord, how could you know? I ain't slept good in a couple weeks now. I see, said the master. Askia, remember we are here to make this planet better. Now, I have a crucial duty for you. He waved his hand and the doors opened again. Tadashi, come in. Tadashi stepped into the room and knelt beside Askia but made sure to be ever so little further forward than Askia. Askia laughed softly at the petty display. The master rose from his chair. Askia, Tadashi, you are my two best agents. You're going on a very important assignment together. Yes, sir, the two shinobi said. Neji. Neji could feel himself waking up. His unfocused eyes saw only vague shapes and dim light. Had he just woken up? He ran through his memories. The last thing he could remember was the war. The battle against the Ten Tails. He remembered taking an attack for Naruto, and laying in his arms as his body shut down. Then, nothing. Maybe he was saved. Maybe someone had brought him back. His body didn't seem weak or sore. It seemed stronger than it had ever been before. He could slowly gaze down. Why could he stand if he was just revived? When he looked at his hand he realized just what this was. He watched his fingers come together, forming from the dust and matter around him. That was proof. Neji was the subject of the summoning jutsu. Reanimation. Neji peered forward, his hand back to his side. His eyes, now focused, acclimated to the dim light in the chamber, saw a guy, the features of his face covered in shadows. Neji supposed he was the summoner. This guy put his hands on his hips. Good, I see that it worked. He began to walk in a large circle around Neji. I must say I wasn't planning on putting you to use quite soon. However, problems from my latest mission placed me in a bit of a situation. One where the Byakugan would be handy. Neji was standing where he was, shoulders hunched. It was hard to move his body. What date is it? Is the war finished? Did we win? Oh, yes, we won, the summoner laughed, still circling them. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here right now. But that is all ancient history and quite beside the point at the moment. Neji tried to turn to face the man, but he couldn't. What of my friends? Family? The man laughed again. They are also not very relevant either. But what is relevant? Neji growled. Who are you guys? The summoner stopped, somewhere behind Neji from the sound of his voice. You may call me the master. As to relevancy, I'll show you, but first things first. Neji heard the man walking closer to him and felt his finger as he traced an elaborate symbol on his back with chakra. There. The man said. That should keep you well behaved. Now, come with me. Neji heard the man walk away from him and open a door. Neji's body moved on its own accord to follow. They made their way down hall after hall. Passing by several open doors and large rooms with no people, Neji realized that he had no clue where he was. Most likely he had never been to this place before. After the 6th or 7th hallway they stopped at an open door, through which the summoner went. Neji followed and was shocked to find a bedchamber. Badly damaged, most likely from an explosion. One corner emanated from a massive metal door in the floor. The summoner slid to the far wall, his back still to Neji. I'm trying to find a way inside this vault. When me and my men first arrived we tried to open the door, but paper bombs hidden on the door went off, killing 3 of my agents. Judging by his tone of voice the man wasn't too upset about the loss. Neji glanced at the door. So what do you want me to do about it? The door's welded shut, but I don't need you for that. I want to see what else is in the vault, you see, if there is an easier route in. That's where those eyes of yours come in. Neji nodded. Understood. He activated his Byakugan and scanned the vault, albeit that was an understatement. It was a large underground complex in and of itself. The walls of the vault are laced with some kind of chakra. It would be difficult to try to get in any other way than the door. There are also snares of many kinds. Snakes and spiked pits. Tripwires set off kunai and poison dart launchers. The paper bombs look very deliberately placed, close to the vault door. I think they're supposed to go off as soon as someone gets into the second one. Then the blast would be channeled out of the vault, killing everyone in this room. The summoner nodded his head. Okay. I'll call you the next time I need your services. The man made a few hand signals and Neji felt himself fading away. What was to come following this badly begotten resurrection was the last thing on his thoughts. In the early hours of the morning Sarada stood where her father had once showed her and watched flames dance briefly and brilliantly on the surface of the water. Her latest attempt at the fireball jutsu. She began to raise her hands, to begin weaving the signs, but she stopped halfway, feeling the weight of her mother's hands on her shoulders. Sarada's mind went to a recollection from the day before, when she came home after hours of practice and had to endure her mother's worrying. Sakura kept worrying her, about the burn marks on her lips and the danger of utilizing too much energy. She knew her mother was afraid, she genuinely did. But she knew, deep down, she had to learn the jutsu before her father left the hamlet. She needed to prove to him that she was a real Uchiha. Sarada glanced at the eastern sky, looking at the sun going up beyond the horizon. For a little moment she argued with herself if she could stay or if it was time for her to go for the academy. In the end she determined that whatever else, she could not live with herself if she didn't give it at least one more go. She took a deep breath and made the hand gestures. Her chakra rose up in her chest. It felt fantastic, billowing up inside her. With a sense of purpose she directed that energy to flow up and out through her mouth. From her lips flames sprang forth, an inferno that splashed down onto the lake. For a moment, not more than half a minute, she saw the fireball as her father had showed it to her. But in that moment she was too caught up in the doing to really appreciate the results of her effort for what they were. She stared out at the lake for a few moments, blinking slowly as she absorbed what had happened. She could sense that was her best effort yet. If she hadn't got the hang of it yet, it had to be good enough to show her father. Suddenly she was in a frantic state of happiness, dancing up and down, waving her arms in the air, smiling broadly at the prospect that her father would approve of her growth and efforts. Then just as suddenly she dropped to her knees, a sensation in her chest like all of the oxygen in her lungs had just evaporated. Sarada took a deep breath, knowing full well what her mother had been warning her of. Now that she was not pushed by a strong need to perform the fireball jutsu, she could feel her energy, her chakra, drain from her body. She stood on unsteady legs and began to walk, forcing herself to ignore that tiredness and focusing her mind on a new, though much more usual, purpose. How to be on time for school. Breathing deeply, Sarada pushed past her fatigue, one foot in front of the other as she made her way to the academy. Sarada was one of the first kids to arrive to the school, something she took a tiny amount of pride in, despite her tardiness. Not because she was an especially hard-working student, though her marks were excellent. No, she thought, most of the kids in her class were here for the wrong reasons. Take those students who hailed from proud shinobi families or otherwise regarded being a ninja as their path in life, and you were left what the young Uchiha referred to as ninja fans, civilian-born pupils who had only attended because they felt that ninja were cool. After arriving at the academy, Sarada walked to her seat, which was toward the front of the class and off to the side away from the windows. She nearly fell asleep at her desk, her head drooping and her eyelids closing as the tiredness she'd felt earlier came back to her. She used the opportunity to rest, heard students approaching, notated them in the back of her mind. After a few moments a small group of the ninja fans woke her from her repose. They had begun one of their favorite arguments. Who is the best and greatest Hokage? Sarada turned her head and opened one eye, zooming in on them. Soon the talk was including most of the lads that had made it to this point, and even a couple of the girls. The first 4 Hokages and the 7th were all mentioned often, but most seemed to like Naruto. But no matter who they were supporting, Sarada said that none of their arguments were very in-depth, just surface-level observations. None of these children truly knew what they were talking about, Sarada thought, and bit her teeth together. She knew Naruto Uzumaki, the Lord 7th, used to call him uncle before she knew how important he was to the community, yet she could see that there was a level of comprehension even she had yet to acquire. The fanboys talked at each other in circular arguments for some moments, until Ronin Moto arrived in the room. His eye was followed by Sarada. Ronin was one of the few civilian-born students to earn Sarada's regard. He was very brilliant, hard-working, and the only member of her class to regularly score above her in written tests. But his terrible physical condition was the worst-kept secret at the academy, and it dragged him down in the class rankings, earning him his only above-average overall grades. His personality was another factor that kept him back. He seemed to maintain an almost constant contempt for everyone around him, and was a bad team player with his classmates. "Hey, Ronin," one of the fanboys shouted to him from across the room. "Who do you think is the best Hokage?" Ronin moved over to the group and sat down on a desk nearby. The 4th Hokage, obviously. One of the fanboys who had said so before grinned at his fellows, told Ya. Another fanboy held out his hand to shut the other up. "Why?" Ronin shrugged. The first Hokage hailed from the Senju clan and had the wood-style Kekai Genkai. The second was also from the Senju clan and was the first's younger brother. The third came from the Sarutobi clan. The 5th hailed from the Senju and was the first's granddaughter. The 6th had a legendary ninja as a father, and he too had the Sharingan. The 7th is a Jinchuriki and the son of the 4th. The 4th Hokage had no famous pedigree and he possessed no unique innate abilities. He became everything he was through his own hard work and talent. The fanboys whispered amongst themselves for a bit, evidently confused by a well-made point. Then a female on the outskirts of the group spoke up. "Well, I think the Lady 5th is the best Hokage. She's the prettiest." Sarada let out a sigh. That was Natsuko Taka, one of the worst of the ninja fans. The young Uchiha found her exuberant, always happy personality grating on his nerves. If Sarada ever became a shinobi, she was sure she would break under the mental pressure. Ronan looked like he was thinking the same thing, for he shook his head and went away from the fanboys to his usual seat. The fanboys, for their part, let him go, and returned to their own talk. About 5 minutes before class started, the other students began arriving and taking their places. Bolt Uzumaki swaggered in as like he owned the area. Sarada observed him with interest, something she found herself doing often. The youngster was a trickster without remorse, and Sarada saw it unseemly of the son of Hokage. But Sarada had come to understand the reason for his actions and, to some extent, sympathized with him. Just like Sarada herself, Bolt was in need of the attention of a father who was too busy to give him much attention. A father who had assumed tasks that took away from his time with his family. Bolt sat in the middle of the classroom where everyone could see him. Sarada looked up from her desk as the class was about to begin, as the teacher was walking in. Shino Aburame was a weird one, that much was for sure. He was clearly skilled and capable, but his love of insects and the visor that hid his eyes put many off. But Sarada had begun to like him. His advice and encouragement was seldom given, but always honest and perceptive. Shino headed to his desk, in the front of the class. "Why? This is the start of your week-long study period." Shino began to speak after the bell had rang. "Your graduation exam is a week away. Take your time over the next several days to prepare any way you need to, for this exam is your first big milestone in becoming a ninja." Shino moved to sit down, and Sarada believed she heard Bolt conceal a giggle behind her. "Huh," Shino heard him say as she sat down uneventfully. Shino stared directly at the blonde joker. "Did you think you'd get something?" Bolt held up his hands defensively. "Oh no, sensei, not at all." "Good," remarked Shino. "But, I figured I'd give this to you back." Sarada could feel a shiver run down her spine, as she was sure that her classmates did. Not for the way Shino had said the sentence. Everyone stared as a replica of Shino standing behind Bolt, stooping over the student. He put a tack into Bolt's palm, then became a cloud of insects that flew back to the real Shino. The room was silent, as it usually was after a Shino demonstration, and the study period started. The ninja fans sat around the class chatting, without actually doing anything to prepare. The ones serious about their training go off to one of the practice locations outside the school, or converse with Shino. Shikadai Nara was sleeping in one of the desks in the back corner of the room. Sarada still couldn't figure out how someone as dumb and lazy hadn't dropped out of the program. Sarada herself would usually have been doing something productive with her time. But the thought of showing her father the fruit of her hard work and practice took possession of her mind. In her imagination, she went through several situations. Ones when he was impressed by her work and taught her how to wield Sharingan. Ones where he vowed to stay at home and teach her. Ones he was disappointed with and never taught her again, or worse, tossed her out of the clan. "Is something wrong, Sarada?" Shino stood in front of her desk, breaking through the young Uchiha's thoughts. Sarada busied herself by picking up pencil and paper. "No, Shino-sensei, it's all right." "Has it anything to do with your father?" Shino wondered. Sarada reached for the pencil and it fell from her hand just as fast. "Sarada," Shino added, "your father has a hard time saying things to anyone, but he loves you, don't forget that." Sarada lifted her eyes to her teacher. "Thank you, Shino-sensei." Shino nodded and returned to his desk. Sarada stared at the clock. She was astonished to find that half the day had gone. The remainder of the day she tried to think about some higher theoretical topics. Nothing that would ever be on the graduation exam, but something that could take her mind off of her father. Don't make her scared about exhibiting him her fireball jutsu. School was out a few hours later. Sarada grabbed everything and shot out of the building. She ran straight home. She didn't stop till she stood at the entrance door of her house, the nervousness once again inside her. She inhaled deeply and forced herself in. Her father might not be home, she told herself, and her mother was probably at work. She glanced down at a pair of sandals on the floor, evidence that her father was home. Then she caught sight of the sword on the wall. That was enough. Sarada hurried through the home, not bothering to unpack her belongings, not bothering to take off her shoes. She searched numerous rooms before she discovered him sitting in the family shrine, meditating. She slowed to a walk and approached her father to speak to him. "Yes, Sarada?" Sarada's eyes opened before she even declared herself as her father said. Papa," Sarada stammered. "I got the fireball jutsu down, I want to show you." Sasuke looked to his side and saw Sarada. "Very well. I will get ready shortly and then we can leave." He looked down at her feet. "You look ready to go though." Sarada looked down at her feet and realized that in the excitement to see her father she had forgotten to take off her shoes. "Oops, sorry Papa." The two were ready to travel in no time, Sasuke just putting on his sandals and grabbing his sword. They started for the training ground, Sarada following in her father's steps. She could feel her nerves getting to her, holding them back by repeatedly reminding herself what Shino had said to her. Her father was fond of her. As they reached the lake on the training area, Sarada went ahead of her father to the edge of the pier. She observed Sasuke sit down at the edge of the river. Sarada ran her hands through the signs. She breathed, drew chakra into her chest, felt it go up her neck. She inhaled, shouting, "Fire style! Fireball jutsu!" That kind of energy flowing out of her lips and into flames seemed natural. It looked so magnificent, the way the flames danced across the sea. She kept that dancing up for a whole minute. The light on the face of the lake. The chakra she had gathered inside her ran out. The flames ceased to be, and Sarada watched the fire fade as if it had never existed. She turned to gaze at her father expectantly. Her heart fell as she watched him get up and go over as if it were just another day. She couldn't help thinking, as he towered over her, that she had disappointed her father. She shut her eyes. Sasuke's voice boomed. "That's my girl." It drowned out the dissonance in Sarada's brain and heart. Sarada opened her eyes as her father put a hand on her head and ruffled her hair. The girl pushed the hand away, ran a hand through her hair. She was proud and relieved. She smiled and she hugged her father. Sasuke rubbed her back. "Come on, Sarada, let's head home." Her dad put his arm around her shoulder and they began to walk home. Walking, it was a dull task that Sarada had been doing for as long as she could remember. But this felt like something else. It felt as if she was beginning her existence and these were her first steps. Gaara was in the Tsuchikage's mausoleum, in the village hidden in the stones. There was a funeral held today for Onoki, the third Tsuchikage. The event started late in the afternoon. The body would be buried next to the last two Tsuchikage, with all the living Kage conducting the rites. This was a part of a policy that had been established by 5 great shinobi nations at the first Kage summit to be held in the aftermath of the Fourth Great Ninja War. Whenever a Kage died, his peers would gather in his village for a funeral separate from the family or public ceremonial. The lid was open and you could see the body of Onoki. The dead were supposed to seem dignified and serene, but Gaara thought the old man just looked as obstinate and bullheaded as ever, as if he was about to spring out of the coffin and laugh at death itself for thinking it could hold him. Gaara guessed that was part of what made the man so cool. There was a reason Onoki was the longest-serving Kage. The Kage stood in a circle around the coffin, each in the robes of his office and with a headband bearing the insignia of his village. Fourth and present Tsuchikage, Kuretsuchi, was leading. To her left were Mei Terumi and Chojuro, the 5th and 6th Mizukage respectively. To their left, going around the circle, was the biggest contingent, containing the 3 live Hokage, Tsunade, Kakashi, and Naruto. To their left, Gaara himself, the 5th Kazekage, stood alone. The 4th Raikage, and Darui, the 5th and current Raikage, finished the circle. Kuretsuchi walked forward and began to give the eulogy as the reigning Tsuchikage. Gaara didn't even pay attention to it. Instead, he closed his eyes and started to think of his own time with Onoki. He encountered him at the Kage Summit just before the Fourth Great Ninja War broke out. The age and experience disparity had exacerbated a divergence in world perspective that had originally produced conflict between the two. Onoki deemed his young sand counterpart ill-prepared for his duty. A youngster playing as being Kage. Gaara in his own way saw the Tsuchikage to be a has-been old man who had forsaken his convictions when they proved inconvenient. But then war came and like it did for so many other things it transformed the bond between them. Gaara noticed Onoki's brilliance, indeed, but even more than that, his enduring will. What he learned to respect most about the old man. Onoki also observed that Gaara exhibited a strength of character and knowledge above his years. They became good friends, maybe the best Gaara had with any of the Kage save for Naruto. When the eulogy ended, Gaara opened his eyes and a little smile appeared on his face. Kuretsuchi walked over to the casket and put her headband with the body. Then she used her chakra to lower the coffin lid down from the ceiling and over the body. The other Kage took a step forward and the tomb closed by itself. They removed their headbands, the emblem of their unity, no longer separated by simple village loyalties. The Kage of each village withdrew sealing paper and put it along the sides of the casket. They each channeled their chakra into their separate sealing sheets, energizing and activating the seals. Now the body was safe from looters and grave robbers. It would require an unbelievable amount of power or the collaboration of those involved in the funeral. That was also the result of another policy established during that first post-war Kage summit. To stop the reanimation jutsu from being utilized for ill purposes, it was decided that powerful seals would be placed over the final resting places of anyone considered to be of cage-level power and skill, making it harder to obtain the DNA samples required to conduct the reanimation. It was the first time the policy has been applied to a real cage. The 5 current cage held a short cage summit in an upper room of the Tsuchikage mansion after the funeral. There was no important subject to debate, but to have all of them in the same area at the same time was unusual. Around a modest table sat the 5 leaders of the shinobi. The Tsuchikage, host of the summit, got to speak first. Well, mourning my grandfather's passing, my people continue with the day-to-day activities. I have no issues to talk here. Are there any concerns that would be raised before the summit? Naruto lifted his hand. Yeah, I have one. Just before I left for the funeral I was hearing reports that the village hidden in the rain has gone dark. Did any of you guys hear about this? Kuretsuchi rested her elbow on the table. We haven't talked to them in a while, though we usually only talk to each other when we need the other directly. We have a similar understanding with them, Gaara added. Darui shook his head. I'm sorry, but this appears to be just an exceptionally long pause from the rain. We shouldn't read into it too much. Naruto got up. Wait, this information came from a reliable source. If they said it, then it must be true. Besides, the last time the hidden rain shut themselves off from the rest of the world, the Akutsuki was founded and my town was nearly wiped out because of it. I agree, Chojuro said, we should look into this. But we're the furthest away from the hidden rain, we're in no position to do anything about it. Kuretsuchi put a palm to his chin, pondering. Well, the hidden stone, leaf and sand are the closest. So we're in the best position to investigate this. But who will investigate? Gaara was the one that supplied an answer. I think we should become a united mission and explore the hidden rain together. Naruto nodded in agreement. I concur. Kuretsuchi shrugged. Why not, all right. The 3 then made a plan and decided on a time and place for their teams to meet for their joint mission. With that subject settled and a few other minor issues dealt with, the cage summit was adjourned and the cage went their own ways. Darkness had fallen and the 5 walked for their lodging to rest for the night and go home on the morrow. Gaara lay in his bed, thinking over the day's events. He enjoyed his well-earned rest, in a way he envied Onoki. Otherwise, for a cage the labor never ceases. It was 4 days after Onoki's funeral. The Hokage had returned to the village hidden in the leaves with little incident. Naruto had gone straight to bed after arriving late the night before, just taking a moment to meet back up with the family. He was supposed to meet with Shikamaru and Sasuke this morning regarding what had happened in the village while he was gone. Naruto was sitting at his desk, with Shikamaru and Sasuke and Shizune lined up before his desk in the office. For some reason Naruto couldn't help but smile. It was lovely to get away for a while and see some folks he hadn't been with in a good time, but it was always glad to be back. Okay, he said. What do you have for me? Shikamaru was the first to say. I'll start with the easy stuff. Nothing important in terms of missions, just a few C and D ranks. There were, however, a series of unusual events that need your attention. Naruto nodded. Go on. Well, remarked Shikamaru. We've received a message from Orochimaru. Naruto lifted an eyebrow and crossed his arms. Orochimaru. What did it say? Shikamaru looked to Shizune and nodded, and she went to open the door. The messenger wouldn't deliver it to anybody but you. All we know is that the hidden sound was assaulted and that Orochimaru is presumed Kia. Shizune stepped back into the office, with a Jonin from Hidden Sound behind him. The Jonin entered the middle of the room and bowed down. Good to see you at last, Lord Hokage. The Sound Ninja removed a scroll from his sleeve and handed it to Naruto. Naruto snatched the scroll. What is it? He asked. I don't know, my lord, said the Sound Ninja. Lord Orochimaru said that only you could read it, so no one else has opened it. Naruto nodded and turned the scroll over in his hand. I see. It was shut tight and a clasp kept it from opening. As soon as Naruto's skin touched the mechanism there was a loud beep and everyone in the room jumped. Sasuke reached for the hilt of his sword. What was that? Wondered Shikamaru. I think Orochimaru literally designed this to only open for me, Naruto stated. The messenger nodded. That would be right. A new invention Lord Orochimaru was working on recently, a device that would only open when it identified a specific person's chakra signature. Well, I wish you'd said that, Shikamaru said, giving the Sound Ninja an irritated look. And how can he even know the Hokage's chakra signature? Naruto opened the scroll and began reading, holding up his hand to silence the room. He just had a few sentences, and then his eyes went wide in disbelief. He looked up again at the messenger. Thank you for bringing this to me. You may leave. The messenger bowed once more and then departed the room, accompanied by Shizune. Naruto finished reading the message and put it on the table. He clasped his hands beneath his chin and stared at Shikamaru and then Sasuke. Orochimaru says the one who attacked Hidden Sound has the Rinnegan. Sasuke hardly reacted to this news at all, but Shikamaru had a look of disbelief on his face. The Rinnegan? But the only living person with that is. He gazed at Sasuke. It wasn't me, I can tell you that much, Uchiha defended himself. He's right, stated Naruto. The message said the attacker had the Rinnegan in both eyes, it couldn't have been Sasuke. Shikamaru came to himself. Can we believe this? It's coming from Orochimaru, after all. Naruto nodded. You are right, I don't trust that snake yet. But if a Rinnegan user attacked the Hidden Sound, then we need to see what's going on. Sasuke stepped forward. I'm able to go. Naruto stared at his rival, completely stunned. You. I was his student, said Sasuke. I know how he works better than anyone here. Naruto pondered that for a moment. True, but I have a different assignment for you. At that moment, Shizune returned to the office. Naruto looked at his aide. Please go get Kakashi-sensei for me, Shizune. Shizune nodded and exited the room again. Naruto looked up to his advisor. Shikamaru, do we have any other information on this? We sent an Anbu team to the Hidden Sound to see what's going on. They haven't checked in yet, so we have to assume they've been killed or captured at this point. Naruto sat and thought about this for a time. All right, I have an idea, but let's move on for now. Shikamaru stared at Naruto for a bit, as though trying to figure out what the Hokage was thinking, but he just shrugged. All right, we had a grave robbing incident as well. Naruto got an extremely perplexed look on his face. Grave robbing? Is this a job for the military police or something? Shikamaru closed his eyes. Mostly, yes, but we made an exception this time. The suspect was a highly skilled ninja, and he was targeting Neji's body. Naruto tightened his right hand into a fist and began to shake with mounting wrath. Shikamaru, tell me we know who did it and we've caught him. Shikamaru ignored Naruto's burning fury and continued chatting. No, we don't know who it was. We could put together a little profile on him from Hinata's account of her battle with him and... Naruto stood up and slammed his fist on the desk. You mean to tell me that he hit my wife? Shikamaru panicked, protective, fists thrown up in front of him. No, she caught him robbing Neji's grave and attacked him. Naruto sat back down in his chair, starting to calm himself down gently. Do we know anything about this guy? Shikamaru relaxed back into his usual position. We know that he specializes in infiltration and Earth-style ninjutsu. We have all the squad leaders looking out for anyone matching those descriptors, but there isn't much we can do. Naruto had completely calmed himself and checked his desk to see whether he had harmed anything. Okay, what else? This last part is probably the oddest of the lot, Shikamaru continued, but I think Sasuke should go first. Naruto diverted his eyes to the Uchihas. It was the day you left, Sasuke answered. There was a group of about 24 range shinobi heading for the village. When a squad of Anbu and I came upon them, they retreated without any incident. Naruto looked across at his pal, a little confused. Okay, and... Shikamaru took up where Sasuke had left off. They left behind the body of Jiraiya, which they somehow and for some reason resurrected to an earlier condition of decay. Turning to Shikamaru, Naruto kept his face of confusion, although it was mixed with a slight look of bewilderment. An earlier state of what now? Shikamaru sighed. It doesn't look like he's been dead as long as he has. Naruto's face went back to normal, as he understood the simplest explanation. I want to view the body as quickly as possible. But first I need to talk to Kakashi-sensei. Speaking of which. The door to the office opened and Shizune walked in, followed by Kakashi. Naruto stared up at his former sensei. Kakashi-sensei, this is a bit unusual, but I have a task for you. Kakashi gazed at his successor with a minor astonishment. What do you need? Naruto scooched over. The village hidden in the sound has been attacked, and we have reason to believe that Orochimaru is dead, and the attacker had the Rinnegan. Of course, all the information we have on this comes from Orochimaru's messenger, so we don't know how trustworthy this is. All right, Kakashi responded. Is there anything else we know? Shikamaru spoke. A week ago we sent an Anbu team to the Hidden Sound and haven't heard anything back. We need to prioritize finding them. Naruto nodded in agreement. This has to do with Orochimaru and possibly the Rinnegan, as well as the fact that there is a lack of solid intel. This is an S-rank mission. I think you're our man. Right, answered Kakashi. Is it one-man job? No, I'm giving you a squad of 3, all Jonin, Naruto said. Naruto smiled. Tenten, Ino and Mirai as an attachment of the Hokage Guard. She'd murder me if I sent you on a mission without her. Kakashi turned back and began walking toward the door. I'll be waiting at the main gate for my team. Naruto faced Shikamaru. Go and get the rest of that squad. Shikamaru bowed and got out of the room. All else taken care of, Naruto's attention shifted to his old enemy. A very vital mission, Sasuke. A very important task. At that, Sasuke scowled. Mission? I don't think you've ever given me one. Well, Naruto remarked, now seems like a good time to start. Besides, you are the best equipped for this task. I am sending you to study the situation in the village hidden in the rain. Naruto stood up and unlocked a drawer in his desk. He took out a map and spread it on the table. We have a joint mission with Hidden Stone and Sand to find out what is going on in Hidden Rain. We are to meet in 1 week's time to begin the mission. Sasuke glanced at the map. You want me to represent the Leaf on this mission? Naruto nodded his head. You, Sai and Yamato. The 3 of you will meet in a secret staging area the stone created during the Second Great Ninja War, in the Land of Earth. Sasuke looked at the map for a second. All right, but if the mission is in a week, why are you telling me this now? Naruto put the map back in his desk. You know more about this case than anyone else and I want you to dig up all the facts you can. Sasuke stayed still for a bit, and then he spoke. I will. Sasuke started to walk out of the room, but before he reached the door he turned to face Naruto. Naruto, you remember the promise you made, don't you? Naruto gave a thumbs up. Yes, of course, he responded, grinning. Sasuke nodded, and turned to leave the room. Shizune watched Sasuke leave from the doorway before turning to Naruto. What promise is he talking about? Naruto looked at his assistant. Nothing. Come on, I want to meet Pervy Sage. Naruto and Shizune went to the hospital, where they were met in the foyer by Sakura, who led them down to the morgue. As they entered the room, Sakura retrieved the body from storage and Naruto and Shizune stood at the entrance. Sakura located the correct shelf and slid the table out. She folded the cover in half at the waist, and went back to the door. Naruto proceeded slowly to the dead, his eyes watering with each step, until he stood over the body. He stared at it and let the memories come up. A few moments later, Naruto spoke. Good to see you, Pervy Sage. You look almost precisely how I remember, though I'm sure I'd look different to you. I did it. I fought pain. I took down the Akutsuki. I saved the world. I saved Sasuke. I became Hokage. I became a father and a spouse. Everything you hoped and desired for me came true. Naruto stood there in silence a few moments more before drying out his eyes and turning away. He walked carefully to the door. He halted when he approached Sakura. Put him where he belongs, with all the honors we can give him. He was not looking at her. Sakura looked at him, shocked. Yes, but, are you sure, Naruto? Naruto breathed. I made peace with that a long time ago. I'm just happy he got to come home. With weapons packed and headband tied on, Kakashi stood at the village gates, staring off at the Hokage statue as his team got ready for the operation. He couldn't help but appreciate the squad Naruto had gotten for him. Tenten could provide mid-range support while Mirai, with her wind-type jutsu and trench knives, was a very close combat expert. Ino played a big part in it too, covering a number of the additional jobs with her healing and recon skills and her ability to telepathically contact the community. Tenten finished her final count of the vast cache of weapons, tied on her headband and stared at Kakashi. What's going on, Kakashi-sensei? It's about Orochimaru, isn't it? Kakashi looked away from the monument in the distance. Yes, it does involve Orochimaru, though we're not quite sure in what capacity. I'm sorry we pulled you away from your shop. Tenten grinned and dismissed the idea. Oh, you know it's just something I run in my downtime. I don't get that much business anyway. Kakashi glanced at Ino. How are you and Inojin? Still doing well at the academy? The leader of the Yamanaka clan nodded as she packed her supply of kunai, shuriken, and medical supplies. He's doing good, he's near the top of the class. He's going to be spending the next little while with Shikamaru, since I'm going with you and Sai has another mission that he's starting soon. Kakashi smiled at that, then he turned to Mirai, you ready? The younger Jonin, who was finished packing and leaned against the gates, smiled. I'm always up for it. Kakashi nodded his head and motioned his crew over for a briefing. Here's the deal. We've received news from the village hidden in the sound that they have been attacked. They say the attacker has the Rinnegan and that Orochimaru is most certainly dead. But Mirai didn't react. Ino and Tenten's eyes widened in amazement. What? Are you sure? You know we can't trust anything that comes from Orochimaru, Ino shouted. Tenten nodded. I know, said Kakashi, but if there's any truth to what they say, we can't just let that situation sit. Plus we sent an Anbu team to scout the village and we haven't heard back. Tenten gritted her teeth. Then they're probably dead. Kakashi raised his hand, fingers curled into a loose fist. He lifted one finger. First, he said, we're to scout the hidden sound and see what's happened there. Then, we are to determine if Orochimaru is really dead and if possible, retrieve the body and seal it. He raised a second finger to indicate this was the secondary purpose. He went on, putting up a third. We find out what happened to the recon squad at the end. Is that understood? The other three nodded and he put his hand back down. Kakashi looked over his squad mates, judging their emotions. Both Ino and Tenten looked anxious, while Mirai looked cool and confident. Okay, now for the formation. Mirai, your point. Stay ahead of the rest of the group. With your close combat skills I want you to be the first to engage any enemies we run into. The rest of us will be in a flat 3. Tenten, you'll be on the left side of the formation. Guard our flank and back up Mirai. I'll do the same from the right side. Ino, you'll be in the center of the formation, ready to back up whoever needs it. Everyone got that? The 3 Jonin nodded their heads in agreement. Good, said Kakashi. Get away of here. The 4-leaf shinobi departed, headed towards the hidden sound. Uchiha Sasuke headed to the gates of the village with his family, preparing to leave and continue on his trips. Or so the official version of events went. In actuality he was to be a part of a reconnaissance mission into the Hidden Rain and would be spending the next week gathering as much information about the reclusive nation as he could. It wasn't long before they reached the gates, and after a brief stop to take care of the appropriate paperwork, Sasuke set about the task of saying farewell to his family once again. The first few times they'd done this ceremony Sarada had cried, but at a certain age she'd had no more emotions for the occasion. But Sasuke noted she still couldn't help frowning. He kneeled and gave her a warm hug. You don't have to go, do you, Papa? Sarada asked from his arms. Sasuke pulled away from his daughter, wishing that he didn't but knowing that he did for many reasons. Sarada, I must go, he murmured softly. I hope that you can understand why. The girl nodded once, then looked away. Sasuke stood and turned to face his wife. Take care of yourself, Sasuke, she added, smiling. We'll be here when you come back. They hugged long and kissed quickly. Sasuke turned to go. Farewells were said, but he had not walked 20 feet when he heard Sarada racing after him. Wait, Papa. She shouted and Sasuke complied. She stopped a few steps from him and he turned to her. Sarada inhaled deeply and popped a question. When can I learn Sharingan, Papa? Sasuke maintained the same expression on his face, but inwardly he was fighting surprise and fear. He'd never spoken about this with Sarada, had hoped, at least in part, to avoid it. Was teaching her fireball jutsu the cause of this? Sasuke dropped on his knees to bring his face to the level of his daughter's. Sarada, the Sharingan is not something that can be learned like any old jutsu. It is a unique ability of ours that can only be awakened under certain circumstances. Sarada's eyes widened. This was more than she had ever heard of the Sharingan. How do I do that? I can't tell you, Sasuke replied, and to be honest, part of me fears to see you with those eyes. However, if you open it there are a few things I want you to perform. Now Sarada looked more excited. What, father? Sasuke was silent for a bit, choosing his words carefully. First off, I want you to go talk to Kakashi about this. Sarada gazed back at her father, her head tilted to the side in surprise. Grandpa Kakashi has a Sharingan? No, Sasuke said, but he did a long time ago and he could use it better than many Uchiha could. He can teach you how to use your abilities. Secondly, there is a tablet, inside of a hidden room underneath the family altar. If you gain the Sharingan I want you to read it. Ask your mother, she knows where it is and how to get there. Sarada nodded. Yes, Papa. I understand. Sasuke stepped up without more word and silently started walking away from his friends, family and village. Once again, at the gates he had left behind all the significant things in his life. It was just after midday and Kakashi and his squad were making good progress toward the village hidden in the sound. No opponents in sight, but they had not yet exited the land of fire. Before it was ended, Kakashi had a hunch things were about to become hot. Lord Hokage. Kakashi heard from his front. Yes, Mirai? He said. The young Jonin smiled back at Kakashi over her shoulder. See, I told you we could have been to the final valley quicker. Kakashi chuckled. I never had a doubt about you on that score. The final valley was less than half an hour ahead of them, then they would be in the land of sound and the possibility of an enemy encounter would increase. A few more moments passed and Kakashi thought he sensed a presence behind the group. He raised his hand and yelled out for a stop. The squad had collected themselves around him and it was Tenten that spoke. What is it, Kakashi-sensei? Kakashi's eyes darted back and forth, scouring the trees around him for anything. I feel like we're being watched. Earth style. Abyss. A voice yelled from somewhere unseen. Kakashi's eyes startled at the name of an unfamiliar jutsu. He began to glance around even more frantically for the intruder, but he didn't have much of a chance to check around. Then all at once the earth opened under their feet. There was a tremendous abyss, bottomless it seemed. The squad had dropped several dozen feet before Kakashi could react. He saw Ino try to cling to the walls with her chakra, but all it did was slow her descent before shoving her off. Just then Kakashi had a strategy and twisted to get him closer to the wall of the chasm. Kakashi did a series of rapid hand gestures, then exclaimed, Earth style. Mud wall. The wall of rock erupted from the edge of the abyss, forming a makeshift floor for the team to land on. Tenten took a harsh landing and rubbed her backside. What was that? That's right, Ino replied, landing rather more gracefully and starting to get up. I think someone just attacked us. I'm surprised they could use a jutsu of this magnitude. Mirai drew one of her trench knives and channeled her energy into it. She swung her wind blade at the rough surface and frowned as her strike bounced off with no evident harm. This is no ordinary cliff face. Kakashi ran a hand down the wall nearest him, analyzing the jutsu. It feels like there's chakra going through the earth. It lets the user use it, but at the same time it doesn't allow anyone to damage it, and it pushes away any attempts to grab onto the rock with chakra. Tenten stared up at the top of the abyss, 100 meters overhead. Good, but how do we get out of here? Ino said, well, we could climb out, but it would be dangerous without our chakra. Tenten unwrapped one of her explosive kunai and threw it at a section of wall away from the group. It exploded in a tremendous blast, leaving a rock face hardly scratched. Paper bombs won't do. A voice from above, the same one that had told the squad of their current dilemma. Well, if it isn't the copy Nina Kakashi. I suppose you're not copying much these days. Kakashi stared up the top of chasm. A man, most likely the one who cast the jutsu, looked down at them. Kakashi tried to see who it was, but the distance and the dull light in the abyss made it hard to see specifics. You know who I am, now who are you? Then, after a moment's silence, a response came. Why the hell should I tell you? Then Kakashi thought of something. This person was able to sneak up to the group without them knowing until it was too late and hit them with a very advanced earth jutsu. Could this be the grave robber Shikamaru was searching for? The man added, I'd love to stay and chat, but I'm not going to take a chance with the 6th Hokage. Earth style. Tectonic shift. Suddenly the ground around them began to move, the walls of the chasm began to press in around them. Tenten nearly stumbled, but caught herself. He's going to kill us. Kakashi moved rapidly. He made a tiger seal and launched the fireball jutsu, modulating it so the fire covered as large an area as could, screening them from view. Then he went through a series of hand signals that were like second nature. Lighting blade! Screamed the former Hokage. Kakashi added more chakra to the jutsu, trying to increase its cutting power and width. Then he used it on the wall, tunneling through it and leaving a little tunnel behind him. He kept digging out his tunnel as the rest of the crew rushed after him. They burrowed for several minutes with the lighting blade before finally breaking through to the surface. Out in daylight again, it took them a moment to orient themselves. We're in the final valley, Kakashi knew. Tenten stepped forward a few paces, glancing around. You think we lost him? Doesn't look like it, remarked Mirai, pointing up at the cliffs on the other side of the river. There's someone with us. Kakashi noticed a thin man with black hair down to his shoulders. The new visitor leapt down from his perch and alighted on the far bank of the river. Another man rose up from the dirt beside him and joined him immediately. The black-haired man scowled at his compatriot. Was that you, my friend? You said you'd take care of them. The other man, who Kakashi now knew to be the one who had attacked them, laughed at this. You do know that this is the 6th Hokage. The chances of me killing him were minimal. Askia, of course the possibilities of you murdering them were tiny, replied the black-haired man mockingly. With me, on the other hand, the chances are very great. Askia, The one who was obviously named, slapped his forehead. You fool, it would be better they did not know who we are. The arrogant one moved forward. Who am I to deny them the right to know who killed them? I am Tadashi. Pleased to make your acquaintance. Tadashi smiled smugly and bowed, with a rapid flurry of hand gestures. Lighting style. Electric cage. He spread his hands and bolts of lightning shot forth, creating a cage around the leaf shinobi. Then a ball of lightning emerged, and hovered over the center of the circle. Tenten pulled out a couple of shuriken and tossed them at Tadashi. They hit the edge of the circle, and were flung from the air by a bolt of electricity that arced out from the ball of lightning. Kakashi looked over his opponents and decided to ask the more outspoken one a question. Are you working for Orochimaru? He inquired, glancing at Tadashi. The proud ninja chuckled. No, we don't carry that relic. Kakashi nodded, taking in the knowledge before turning to Mirai. He turned to her and said, I think the honor should be yours. The young Sarutobi laughed and drew her trench knives, swiping at the ball of lightning with her wind blades. It fizzed and snapped as it evaporated. Kakashi stiffened his body, ready to fight. Mirai, you take the lighting user. Ino, you tell the village we've run into enemy. Tenten, you cover her and then both of you provide backup. No sooner had Mirai heard the phrase than she was racing for her opponent, who tried to block her with a water wall jutsu. Mirai slashed through it with a wind blade and Tadashi shot a pair of kunai at her in turn. Mirai sprang up to dodge, flipped, and sent a fireball down from above. Tadashi formed another wall of water in response. With the combat going, Kakashi shifted his focus to his opponent who was hanging back waiting for him to make the opening move. Kakashi decided to humor him. He swiftly made a long string of hand signs and shouted, Water style. Water dragon jutsu. A big spout of water erupted from the surface, shaping into the shape of a dragon, which Kakashi sent hurtling at his opponent. Askia replied with a wall of dirt, which the water dragon broke against. Then Kakashi condensed lighting chakra in his hand and shot it out as a gigantic wolf, attached to his hand. It sent the flaming wolf forward, smashing through the mud wall and biting into Askia, who turned to water. Out of the corner of Kakashi's eye he noticed a kunai soaring out of the water towards him. He might instantly pull one of his own and block it before jumping and throwing his knife in revenge. Askia then got out of the water and fought Kakashi in hand-to-hand combat. Askia was talented, but it was evident that his taijutsu was inferior to that of the 6th Hokage. Kakashi just kept pushing his opponent back, step by step, until they were on the bank. Tenten threw many shuriken from the side, forcing Askia to deflect them with a little mud wall. A fleeting diversion opened up a gap and Kakashi lunged for a kick at Askia's head. The user of Earth style managed to block it, but the exertion left him stuck to his own wall of mud. Tenten's kunai, augmented with illumination, suddenly tore through the earthen wall, some of them hitting Kakashi's opponent, who managed to evade a direct hit. Askia broke his block and established distance between himself and Kakashi. He put himself under the neighboring cliff wall. Tenten smirked as if she had been waiting for this moment and made a hand motion to focus her chakra. A loud screeching sound drew everyone's attention to a number paper bomb-laden kunai scattering all over the cliff's face. They detonated on Tenten's command. The explosion caused enormous portions of the cliff wall to break off and fall on top of Askia. There was no evidence of the earth jutsu user for a few moments, then Tenten screamed, I got him. Kakashi looked over at the other battle. Mirai had her opponent on the ropes with all she had. Tadashi focused all his efforts on avoiding, unable to attack because to the wide, sweeping wind blades and Ino's skillfully targeted shuriken. Tadashi, to his credit, didn't seem to be hurt, and was dodging every strike thrown his way. Suddenly, there was an explosion from the earth underneath Mirai and Tadashi's feet. It blew the two away from each other and threw Mirai hard into the cliff wall. Tadashi got to his feet as Askia came up out of the earth beside him. I've got the message, Tadashi, said Askia. We're done here, mission complete. We're to fall back. Tadashi smiled slightly. Okay. He turned to the leaf shinobi. I'm sorry to cut this short, but I promise that next time we meet I'll see you safely to your graves. With that, Askia seized his countryman by the shoulder and together they vanished into the dirt. Kakashi, Ino and Tenten ran over to Mirai after waiting a few moments to ensure the enemies had left. Ino put the young Sarutobi on her lap and looked at her back. Looks like a moderate blunt force trauma. You're lucky it didn't do damage to your spine. Just hang on a moment. Ino's hands began to glow green as she repaired Mirai. Tenten looked at Kakashi. What do you think, Kakashi-sensei? They both appeared to be at least Jonin level. Kakashi nodded his head. Yes, they certainly were very skilled and we know they don't work for Orochimaru. One of Tenten's eyebrows raised. Do you honestly think we can trust anything they told us? He was telling the truth, Ino noted. That guy was so full of himself, his ego wouldn't have let him lie about that. She paused, and then added, but at least he was good looking. Kakashi nodded his head. Yes. More than that, they weren't trying to stop us, just hold us up. Whoever they work for, they have done with the village hidden in the sound. Think it's worth it to keep going to the sound village then? Ino inquired as she finished healing her. Kakashi shut his eyes and thought for a second. We have to see, maybe we can make something of what they left behind. Is she ready to leave, Ino? Ino got up. Yeah, she'll be all right. Kakashi nodded, understanding. All right then, let's go then. The gang soon made their way to the village hidden in the sound. As they got closer, Kakashi saw that there were less and less individuals that they were coming across. When they reached the edge of the village, Kakashi ordered a stop. Ino, Kakashi began as they assembled, I need you to do some recon in the village. Ino nodded and saw a bird perched in a nearby tree and used her mind transfer jutsu on it. Ino's body slumped as the bird took flight in the direction of Sound Village. Ino regained consciousness after around 10 minutes. Kakashi knelt beside her. What did you see? Ino looked down to the ground, as though struggling for the words. That kind of destruction. I haven't seen anything like it since the war. It reminds me too much of when pain invaded the leaf. Got it, Kakashi murmured, stroking Ino's shoulder. We should get in there and start looking, maybe we may find anything beneficial. Soon the team entered the settlement proper. They all halted as they reached the urban regions. There were buildings crushed, turned to rubble everywhere, streets with big craters in them, not a sign of life. Ino, send a message to the village, Kakashi said. Tell them that the village hidden in the sound has been completely destroyed. We met the enemy, and we don't know who they are, but they struck first. Coming out of the darkness, Neji could feel himself returning to the world of the living. Again he seemed to be wanted by his summoner. He opened his eyes and looked around the room, a dark room like the last one he'd been summoned to, but that had been a much smaller space. Instead it was a large room that Neji stood in the middle of. On a raised platform, a man Neji guessed to be the master sat, concealed from view by a thin curtain. I owe you my thanks, said the master. Without those eyes of yours we wouldn't have been able to clear out as quickly as we had. The mission was a success because of you. Glad to be of service, Neji said sarcastically. The master took a drink. Now we come to the real reason I acquired you. Neji's one eyebrow rose in curiosity. Oh, indeed, said the master. I thought your skills would prove useful for this mission. It also gives us some delicious irony. Neji's eyes narrowed, curious as to what this man was up to. The master sipped again. But first, some background information. It's been nearly 15 years since the Fourth Great Ninja War ended. Shortly after the conflict ended, the fifth Hokage retired, Kakashi Hitaki taking the mantle of the sixth. Several years ago he stepped down in favor of Naruto Uzumaki. The master rubbed his chin. You died protecting him, if I remember correctly. Either way, he is now the leader of the village hidden in the leaves. Neji's eyes lifted to meet those of the master. That's nice to know, but what about my family? The master took his hand from his chin. I was just getting to that. They are relevant to this mission too. Your dear friend Naruto started a family. With a Hyuga, your eldest cousin I think. She gave up her claim to the Hyuga clan for him, believe it or not. Neji smiled at the news, having long been a silent supporter of Hinata's feelings for the Uzumaki. The master said they have 2 kids together. Bolt, who I understand is a rambunctious preteen boy, and Himawari, an adorable little girl. Neji eyed the master suspiciously. And why is this pertinent to my mission, You want me to assassinate Naruto? My cousin? One of their children? The master laughed. His voice was booming and deep in the room. I could tell you to attack him, but I won't. I know too well that a direct confrontation with someone of his power would only end in disaster. All I want is to host a little family reunion for you. The master gestured and a door behind Neji opened. Askia, come in. A man of average height and build walked into the room and knelt slightly behind and to the right of Neji. My lord. The master waved his hand and the doors closed once more. He paused, took another sip of his drink and then spoke. Good work with Tadashi on delaying the team from the leaf. Not every day that you fight the 6th Hokage. Now I have another mission for you. Yes, my lord. Askia's eyes wandered over to Neji. Sir, is this? The master nodded his head. Yes, he is to be on your team for this mission. Askia's turned his eyes away from Neji. I see. The master stooped and picked something up. Askia, you take Neji here and head south to the land of rivers. You will meet with one of my agents from the land of wind and then continue to your objective in the village hidden in the leaves. This will keep you out of sight of those extra patrols the leaf has put up. A scroll floated through the curtains and landed in front of Askia. That has mission particulars for your eyes only. Askia took the scroll and put it aside. Yes, my lord. The master said, Neji, go with Askia. Obey him as you obey me. Hyuga, resurrected, glanced at Askia sideways. I don't suppose I have a choice, do I? The master chuckled. You learn fast, Hyuga. The master flicked his wrist and the door opened once more. Dismissed. You go first thing tomorrow. Rest, prepare for tonight. Askia stood, bowed and left the room. Neji turned and followed him out the door, his body moving on its own. Askia paused as the door swung shut behind them. He sank down in a chair near the wall and for a few moments stared into space. Neji spoke after a few moments of watching him. I don't know what your master has in mind for my family, but I'm sure it's nothing good. Askia looked at Neji. He leaned back and closed his eyes. Sometimes bad things need to be done for a greater good. Neji looked at his handler for a second, wishing he could hit him now. But does that make the deed any less terrible, or even bearable? The question seemed to strike a chord with the rain shinobi, who opened one eye and looked at Neji. It shouldn't, he answered, gravely and seriously. The fact that they are terrible reminds one that sometimes they are necessary, and that they shouldn't be done otherwise. For a few more moments, the Hyuga prodigy watched Askia. You don't get much sleep. Askia yawned by way of reply. You are correct, I have not been getting much sleep lately. Even without the use of those eyes of yours you noticed. Tell me, are all Hyuga that perceptive or are you something else? Neji decided not to dignify that with a reply. There was a lot of awkward silence before Askia finally rose. Askia yawned again, and left the room. You should get some sleep, we've got a long day of travel tomorrow. One of Neji's eyebrows lifted. Sleep? You know I'm dead, don't you? Askia stopped, glancing back over his shoulder at Neji. For a moment, the Hyuga thought he saw pity in his eyes. Right, how daft of me. Go wait in the entrance hall then. Neji moaned, his body obeying the compulsion, bemoaning this horrible twist of fate. Sarada sat in her classroom, waiting for teams to be assigned. It was 2 days since the graduation exams, Sarada having passed with flying colors, top of the class, and today the immediate future of the 30 new genin would be decided. The class rankings were posted in the hall outside, with separate lists for the overall scores, theoretical knowledge, physical conditioning, ninjutsu, taijutsu, genjutsu and weapons proficiency. A group of ninja fans sat at the front of the class, admiring their new headbands. These are so cool, man, one of them said. Another adjusted his. Yeah, but I wonder why you see so few ninja wearing them. It has gone out of fashion since the end of the 4th Great Ninja War. A voice called from the other side of the room. There sat Ronin, the only student to beat Sarada on the theory, but near the bottom in physical conditioning, and slightly above average in everything else. With most of the world at peace and the 5 great shinobi nations allied with one another, the precedence for wearing the headbands has diminished. These days most ninja only wear them during missions, when announcing their allegiance is more important. One of the ninja fanboys sulked. Well, that's not very cool. Sarada scoffed silently and began watching the other students make their ways in. There were a handful of other students who truly had Sarada's respect and her hopes of being assigned to a squad with, Ronin being one of them. The first one to walk in was Inojin Yamanaka. The Yamanaka clan's heir, he was high all around, finishing 3rd overall for the class rankings. Shikadi Nara, who Sarada thought was unreasonably lazy, was with him, as was Chocho Akamichi, who had been in the graduating class even though she was a year younger than everyone else. Apparently, one of the ninja fanboys was thinking the same thing about her. Hey, Chocho, what's up with graduating early? Chocho giggled and winked at the lad. I took the test early and passed, it's that simple. The ninja fanboy heaved a sigh at the non-answer and switched his focus to Shikadai. Hey, Nara, who do you think you'll be partnered with? Shikadai looked at the other boy, as if wondering if it was worth it to answer. He apparently decided it was. Yeah, I know exactly who will be in my squad. The ninja fanboy smiled at him sardonically. Oh yeah, how do you know? Peep at the listings. Shikadai sighed and turned his head a little to the side, grabbing his earlobe to show off the only silver hoop earring that he wore there. That's how I know. The ninja fanboy was stumped by the cryptic answer and just watched Shikadai walk off to sit with Inojin and Chocho. Sarada had to admit that she had no idea what he was talking about either. The next person to walk in that Sarada wanted on her team was Haruto Hyuga, the newest prodigy from that clan, being marked as the most promising member since Neji Hyuga himself. Haruto was extremely talented, and earned the second highest overall scores behind Sarada. And then in came Spike Kuro. A civilian by birth, Spike was noteworthy in his early days of school only for his large eyebrows and total ineptness, his marks being the lowest in the class in every subject. However, a couple years ago Spike had begun training with Rock Lee and the improvement had been dramatic. His fitness and taijutsu skills quickly became the best in the class, even better than Sarada and Haruto, the resident prodigies, while in other areas he had improved to about average. His hard work and great improvement had earned Sarada's unspoken respect, even if he was now in those detestable green spandex training suits. The last person Sarada would want on her squad was Kano. Kano was an immigrant from another country and didn't really like talking about herself. But she was noted for her wonderful natural swiftness and dexterity. These traits made her excel at taijutsu, of which only Spike was better than her and made her the most dangerous weapon user of the class. The meeting began soon after she entered the classroom, with Shino entering the room after all the graduating students had arrived. He walked to his desk at the front of the room, holding the list of squad assignments. Today, you graduate from the academy, so this is your last day here. You will be formed into 3-man squads, under the command of a Jonin. This Jonin will be your field commander, as well as your teacher from now on. I'll start announcing the teams. Sarada leaned back, listening for the names of the people she wished to link up with, and for some reason, she added Bolt Uzumaki to the list. Team 1. Inojin Yamanaka, Shikadai Nara, Chocho Akamichi. Inojin teamed up with their. Both teams 2 and 3 were full of ninja fans. Team 4 will consist of Haruto Hyuga, Bolt Uzumaki, and Tora Yamato. So much for her guilty pleasure of having Bolt on her team, and Haruto wouldn't be available either. The ninja fans filled in teams 5, 6 and 7. Team 8 will have Haruto Hyuga, Spike Kuro and Kano. To Sarada's disappointment and dismay, she had missed the chance to be on a team with both Spike and Kano. That left Ronin as the only acceptable teammate. Sarada resigned herself to the fact she was going to have to deal with at least one ninja fan as a teammate. Team 9 had neither Ronin nor Sarada on its roster. Team 10 will consist, as you can imagine, of Sarada Uchiha, Ronin Moto, and Nitsuko Taka. Sarada let out a sigh of relief that she'd been put on the same team as someone like Ronin, but Nitsuko was one of the people she wanted to avoid most. All the team assignments are here, said Shino, dropping the list on his desk. Your Jonin senseis will be here shortly. Sarada sat back as all the other students started moving around to sit with their new teams. Ronin crossed the room and sat down next to Sarada. The young Uchiha wasn't sure, but she thought she caught him glaring at her before he took his seat. Nitsuko then took a seat next to Ronin, smiling and humming to herself. Well, this is exciting, she exclaimed to her new teammates. Sarada decided the best way to handle this was to ignore her completely. Ronin must have thought the same, for neither spoke. The first Jonin to enter the room was Konohamaru Sarutobi, who Sarada knew was excellent friends with the Hokage. He didn't even call for his team. Inojin, Shikadai and Chocho just stood up and walked away with their new sensei. Looks like Shikadai was telling the truth when he said that he knew who would be on his team. The next 2 Jonin that arrived were unknown to Sarada and they were assigned to different teams. Then Rock Lee came into the room. Sarada perks up when she sees the master of taijutsu. Uncle Lee, you going to be my teacher? Lee blinked at Sarada, as if surprised to be asked the question. Oh, sorry Sarada, I'm not your sensei. Teammate, come with me, time for you to show me how the bright flames of your youth burn. Lee looked at Ronin, jaw open. I don't understand, was that a euphemism or something? Sarada grinned. No, that's just how he is. The next couple of Jonin to come in were on separate teams, and Sarada didn't recognize any of them immediately. After a while, Sarada's team was the only one left in the room. By this point Nitsuko was practically bouncing in her seat as she turned to her new teammates. Oh, this is so exciting, I wonder who our new sensei is. Again Sarada and Ronin both opted not to answer. The door opened then and the 3 new genin looked inside expecting to see who it was. That anticipation turned to confusion at the sight of the person who came through that door. Sarada turned her head to the side. Lord Hokage, is there a problem? Our sensei couldn't make it. Naruto stood in front of the classroom, his arms crossed and a big smile on his face. No, he arrived just fine. I'm your new sensei. The three genin were shocked into silence for a moment, then Nitsuko began to scream with delight. We're going to be taught by the Hokage. This is so cool. Still smiling, Naruto waved to the genin to come down to the front of the room. The three did what they were told. Sensei, asked Ronin, what is ahead of us? Yes, sensei, echoed Nitsuko, what? Naruto put a hand on Sarada's shoulder, and one on Nitsuko's, Ronin standing between them. Trust me, I've got something planned for you. Sarada felt a very weird chakra wrap over her body. And then suddenly they weren't in the classroom anymore, but somewhere outside. Nitsuko looked around them, perplexed. Where do we go? Ronin had an answer. This is the Hokage monument. The Hokage gave a more specific answer. Here we are, standing on the old man, the third Hokage. Ronin reached down and touched the ground, as if to convince himself it was real. But how? That was so fast I wasn't even aware that we were moving. Naruto sat down to the floor. Ah, don't worry about it. Now, why don't we get started on introductions? Ronin dropped his hands into his pockets. Why, you've probably seen our files already. The Hokage glared at the new genin in annoyance. That's not the point, Ronin. Nitsuko was suddenly all excitement. Sensei, why don't you go first? Naruto sighed. Okay, I'm Naruto Uzumaki. I love my family, friends and village. I hate anything that threatens those. My hobbies are, I was going to say things about ramen, but I guess I don't really have time for hobbies these days. My dream is, well, I'm living my dream now, but I guess I want to live up to the legacy left behind by my predecessors. Nitsuko was practically bursting with energy, she wanted to go first. My name is Nitsuko Taka. I love really cool ninja things. I don't know, uncool things. My hobbies are talking about cool ninja things. My dream is to be a cool ninja. Ronin and Sarada both sighed at this, then the latter started her turn. My name is Sarada Uchiha. I love my family and my clan. I hate people who don't take things seriously. My hobby is training. My dream is to become a notable ninja, not just a footnote as the first Uchiha born since the massacre, and I want to move past my clan's bloody past. Ronin sighed deeply, as if he was just annoyed with all the proceedings. I'm Ronin Moto. I love learning and reading. I hate people with unfair advantages. Sarada thought that as he said that, Ronin shot her a glare out of the corner of his eye. I like to read about shinobi history and techniques, that is my hobby. My dream is to be a great ninja like no other. Naruto sat there with his eyes closed, pondering over the answers he had been given. I see. You will start your first mission together tomorrow. Mission, Nitsuko shouted. Sarada and Ronin watched with veiled anticipation. Naruto nodded. Yes, come to Training Ground 7 tomorrow for a survival exercise. Oh, and don't have breakfast tomorrow morning, that would end badly for you. See ya. With that, Naruto waved at them and disappeared, leaving the newly formed squad alone on the third Hokage's head. The three genin looked at each other in confusion, not knowing what to think of the suddenness of it all. Oh, come on, Ronin shouted, throwing his head back in annoyance. Getting us up here, it was so easy for you, couldn't you at least get us down? Stop your whining, said Sarada. You are a shinobi now, do it yourself. Her new teammate crossed his arms over his chest and scowled at the Uchiha heiress. Well, I'm sorry if I expect powerful people to show a modicum of decency. Sarada sighed. Whatever. She decided to take the quick way out of this situation and leapt down off the cliff, going from ledge to ledge until she reached the village below. When she was back on the ground, Sarada started walking home and began to think over what had happened today. She had first thought that teaming up with Ronin would be a boon for her, but looking at his behavior today she was starting to doubt that this was going to be a pleasant experience. Add Nitsuko and it could get downright miserable. What was even more confusing was that the Hokage was her new sensei. How is that? She had never even known it was possible for the Hokage to take on genin students. Didn't he have enough to do already, or something? Sighing, Sarada remembered a simpler time, when the Hokage was simply her uncle Naruto, a close friend of her parents that would occasionally invite her and her mother over for dinner. Only after Naruto became the 7th Hokage did she realize how important he was to the whole village. After that, it was like being too close or familiar with him was selfish, like she was breaking protocol or taking too much of something that should have been for the good of everyone. Now he was her teacher. And hers alone. Well, with Ronin and Natsuko, too. What it meant, Sarada had no idea. But whatever had come before and whatever was to come after, this was the next step on her path of becoming a ninja. Sarada arrived at Training Ground 7 in the early morning, when the grass was still wet with dew. She had realized that Naruto hadn't given them a specific time to arrive, so she left as soon as the sun had risen, just to make sure. It helped that she wasn't supposed to eat breakfast anyway, so she could leave the house earlier. Ronin arrived at the grounds moments after her. The two sat in silence, not too close. They sat there waiting for a couple of hours, during which Ronin began reading a book and Sarada started practicing the hand signs for the fireball jutsu. Natsuko arrived humming a happy little song to herself when 8 a.m. was gone. She sat between her two teammates. They waited on. By 10 a.m. Sarada was beginning to feel the strain. She hardly reacted when Naruto appeared before them in a puff of smoke. "Hey guys, how's it going?" he asked, an oblivious grin plastered on his face. Ronin put his book down and looked at Naruto. "You never told us when to meet up, sensei." "Oh, did I not?" Naruto asked, blushing. "Sorry." Natsuko started jumping up and down, flapping her arms. Sensei, what's our homework?" Their sensei smiled and dug into his pocket. "Here is your mission." He pulled two small bells from his pocket. "How are those our mission?" Sarada asked. "Well, it's not exactly a mission," Naruto said, scratching his chin. "You see, the graduation exam isn't what truly decides if you're to be ninja. There's another test, one you will take as a squad right now." Ronin squinted at Naruto. "Test?" Naruto nodded. "Yes, you see there are only a limited number of teams that will be making the cut. 4 to be precise, and these tests will determine who makes it." Sarada took the hint, "And the teams that don't, will be sent back to the academy." "That's the idea," Naruto said. "Most just drop out of the program rather than go back to the academy." Ronin snapped his book closed and stuffed it into his bag. "So what's the point of this test?" Naruto clanged the bells together. "You are to get these bells from me." He attached them to his belt. "Get them within the next 2 hours and you pass. Don't and you'll be tied to one of those posts." Naruto pointed to the post sitting in the middle of the training ground. "I'll also eat my lunch in front of you while you watch helplessly." Sarada's stomach growled at this and she realized why they had been told not to eat breakfast. That just made her more determined to get one of those bells. "But there are only 2 bells, Ronin objected. "I can understand one for the whole squad, or one for each of us, but only 2. Naruto's face darkened. "Only 2 can get a bell. The other fails." Sarada's eyes grew wide in shock. "I thought 4 teams would make it through." Naruto grinned slyly. "I didn't say they'd pass as they are now." Naruto walked over to the posts and set a timer on top of one of them. "When this goes off, the period is over, then we will continue the test from there. Oh, and come at me with the intention to kill." "Kill? Why should we want to kill?" asked Natsuko, worried. Naruto grinned at her. "Because otherwise you're not gonna get a shot." Sarada braced herself for this test. Naruto raised his hand and then brought it down to signal the start. The 3 genin scattered into the foliage around them. Naruto stood in the center of the clearing. "I see you understand the first part of being a ninja, knowing how to hide your presence." Sarada moved in silence through cover, trying to get an angle on Naruto's blind spot. She found it and gathered her chakra and made a series of hand signs. Fire style. Fireball technique. The fire burst out, engulfing the Hokage in flame. For a moment she thought she had him. Next he was in the fire. He stepped forward, a ball of spiraling chakra in his hand that parted the flame around him, leaving him unharmed. He stepped forward until the ball of chakra was an inch from Sarada's face. The young Uchiha fell back onto her hands, looking up at the Hokage as he dispersed the chakra ball, the light of the fire surrounding them giving him an eerie glow. "Sarada," Naruto said, "that was your most powerful jutsu, wasn't it?" The young Uchiha just nodded, eyes wide with shock, fear, and awe. Naruto stared down at her. "If you don't work together with your teammates, then it's better to use weaker attacks to start out with, then." Suddenly Naruto was hit from behind by several shuriken, and started to fall on Sarada. Then he disappeared in a puff of smoke. Behind him more shuriken were flying straight for the young Uchiha. Sarada had no time to avoid the incoming projectiles, and could only raise her arms to protect her face and body. Most of the shuriken went over her head, but one hit her arm and another cut her shoulder. Ronin came out of the bushes. Cursed. He got away, he muttered through clenched teeth. He glanced at Sarada, but she saw no compassion in his eyes. So he just went into the trees, looking for Naruto. Sarada tried to get up, but pain radiated from her wounded arm and she staggered. Ah, she moaned, reaching to pull the shuriken from her flesh. She threw the bloody weapon down and saw Natsuko lying in a bush nearby. The Uchiha moved over next to his teammate. Hey, Sarada said, kneeling down in the bush beside Natsuko. When no answer came, she looked at the girl. Natsuko was staring wide-eyed at something like she was watching the most amazing movie ever made and couldn't tear her eyes away for 1 second. Sarada followed the hopeless ninja fan's line of sight and saw Ronin fighting Naruto in another clearing. Well, fighting wasn't quite the word. It was more like Ronin wildswinging at the Hokage, who dodged easily, dancing around his younger opponent. After another flurry of attacks from Ronin, Naruto decided to just end it, hitting the genin on the back of his neck, knocking him unconscious. Naruto scooped the boy up and disappeared into the trees with him. Less competition now, I guess, Sarada said, not sure that really made the job easier. Hey, Natsuko said suddenly. One of the bells dropped off during his fight with Ronin. The naive genin climbed out of the bush, and bounded off towards the bell lying on the ground. Hang on, Sarada began. Don't you think that looks... Sarada's warning came too late. There was a loud snap as Natsuko's foot caught in a snare and she was pulled up into the air, hanging from a tree branch by her ankle. Well, that's what you get for walking into an obvious trap, Sarada said, walking up next to her captured teammate. Natsuko fought back. Dunno, sounds pretty rad. Yeah, no it isn't, Sarada said. I think it is, a voice behind Sarada said. Kakashi-sensei used the same trap on me in my test too. Another identical voice asked, don't you think that's a reason it isn't? In a fright Sarada turned, seeing 2 duplicates of Naruto standing behind her. On instinct she grasped for a kunai, but before she could take it from its sheath, one of the Narutos had hit her in the stomach and began carrying her off on his shoulder. The last thing she saw before she went out was the other Naruto cutting down an unconscious Natsuko. When Sarada woke she realized that she couldn't move. Looking down she noticed that she had been tied to the post, signaling that she had failed. She also realized via the blood spots on her red sweater that the wounds from the shuriken were gone. She looked over to her left and saw her 2 teammates similarly tied up, looking despondent. Naruto sat in front of them, noisily slurping down some ramen. Ah, good you're awake, Sarada. Don't worry, I healed your wounds for you. He finished his bowl and set it aside. Now, let's review. Naruto stood up. In a word, terrible. Ronin sneered. You made it far too hard. Naruto glanced at the boy. Did I, Ronin? Ronin kept yelling furiously. I don't have famous ninja parents and family to learn from or special eyes that I just inherit or a mass of living chakras sealed inside of me. I work harder than anyone else, why shouldn't I be a great ninja too? Ronin, Naruto shouted. You despise people for having what you believe is an unfair advantage, like Sarada. And you also scorn people who you think aren't trying as hard as you, like Natsuko. But you allow your contempt for both of them to interfere. You refused to work with them from the beginning and went in alone. Even worse, you risked Sarada with your attacks and didn't even care. But, sensei, Natsuko said meekly. Naruto turned to her. Natsuko, you sat in the bushes and watched everything happen like it was some kind of show you enjoyed, instead of intervening and helping your teammates. Even worse, when you found one of the bells laying on the ground you happily went for it without even considering the fact that it could be a trap. He grimaced at that final comment, like a bad memory. Natsuko sat there, looking humiliated. Naruto faced Sarada. Sarada, you jumped right in there on your own, only thinking about what you can do. You want to make a name for yourself and improve the reputation of your clan. I get what you're getting at, but that's still selfish. You're kind of like your father that way. Naruto paused, his face souring as if he'd said something he would rather not have. Well, I guess you aren't as bad as he was. Never mind that, point is that you shouldn't forget that others can help you achieve your dreams and that you should also help others achieve theirs. The 3 sat there, completely ashamed by the talking to they had received. Naruto crossed over and grabbed the timer. He played with it, then set it back on the post. You will have another hour to get the bells. If you don't get them you will fail the test. However, if you fail I won't send you back to the academy. You will be dropped from the shinobi program entirely. With that, Naruto cut the trio's bonds and then disappeared. The genin sat there in silence for a couple of minutes, not a soul moved or spoke. At last Ronin rose. We have to get those bells. Sarada looked up to him. Yes, but who gets them? If we get them, at least one of us is going to fail. You two can have them, said a depressed-looking Natsuko staring at the ground. You both are obviously far better ninjas than I am. Sarada looked at the girl, surprised at the gesture. Wow, thanks, Natsuko. Ronin knelt beside his teammates. We've got to plot a course of action. Nevertheless, the three of them got down to the business of making a plan. It took about 20 minutes of talking it over before they finally hammered something out. They then set off in pursuit of their target, which took another 20 minutes. When they finally found Naruto, they put their plan into action. Sarada sent a fireball jutsu toward Naruto from her hiding spot. The Hokage grinned. That again, if it didn't work the first time, huh? As Naruto said that, a stream of shuriken came at him from either side and he had to jump out of the way. When he landed, Natsuko burst out of the undergrowth, swinging a kunai at him. He danced out of the way, right into the path of the Sarada and Ronin that were coming. Sarada thought they had him for a moment, but then she saw Ronin was moving considerably slower than her. Naruto was able to easily dodge first Sarada and then Ronin without having to worry about both of them at once, disappearing into the trees. They were cursed, Sarada thought. Damn it, Ronin, why didn't you get there faster? Ronin leaned over, panting hard. Sorry, I haven't eaten since last night. I don't have much strength left. We'll just have to fine-tune the plan. We probably only have one shot left. Ronin's words were resolute, but he crumpled to the ground. Natsuko went up to the boy and poked him in the shoulder. She kept prodding Ronin's prone form. He's not getting up, she said. We're not making it through this, are we? That's so not cool. Sarada said, not sure what to say next. Look, if he can't make it, we just have to do it between us. Natsuko took her eyes off Ronin. His plan didn't work, and you agreed that it was the one that would have the best chance of success. I know it seems uncool to give up, but it's more uncool to try and fail hard. Oh, damn it, Sarada shouted. You've got a dream of some kind, don't you? So do I. We need to pass this test to make them come true, so let's do it. Do you even have a dream? Natsuko questioned. Long as I remember, you've always just kind of been good. No rhyme or reason to it. You always seem to get the best results without trying. Never was able to figure out if that was cool or not. Depended on the day, I guess. Sarada was caught away by Natsuko's surprisingly astute words. I have a dream, she defended herself, though in the back of her mind she recognized that thoughts of creating a name for herself, or increasing the standing of her clan, were imprecise and lacked direction. Gritting her teeth, the young Uchiha made a decision. Fine, Sarada shouted, grabbing Natsuko by the collar. I'm just gonna have to drag you through this for both of us. And if Ronin's out of commission, then we'll just have to make do without him. Okay. Natsuko stood up on her own feet and brushed Sarada's arm off. I suppose it is cool if you are so determined. But what is your plan? Would it be okay if I just started setting fire to these trees? Sarada suggested. Maybe it'll draw him out and you can hit him with a shuriken or something. Anything else? Asked Natsuko. You're really going back and forth on the cool scale here. Maybe we could lay some traps and then bait him in somehow. That could a cool ninja thing to do. Sarada thought about this for a moment. I don't think we have enough time to get that set up right. Natsuko made a face and turned her head away. Okay, do the fire thing. If I think of something better, I'll let you know. She ran through the series of hand signs that were becoming more and more hers and fired a fireball at a tree nearby. Then she went for a second, and a third time. After the fourth, her hands fell to her knees, Sarada acutely aware that she was burning through chakra at a rapid rate. Is that all you got? Natsuko asked the Uchiha prodigy. Shut up, Sarada answered, panting. Wait, she called as a figure walked out of the flames. Okay, I think we're done of here, Naruto replied, carrying an unconscious Ronin over his shoulder. Let's not burn down the training grounds here. Got him, Natsuko screamed, launching a triple of shuriken squarely at Naruto's chest. Sarada's eyes widened as the shuriken neared their victim, who seemed as though he wasn't going to dodge in time. Her eyes stayed wide, but her eagerness turned to shock as a gigantic orange claw came out of Naruto's chest, swiping the shuriken out of the air. Several more of these appendages appeared as an orange glow engulfed the Hokage. Reaching out, they began to smother the fires Sarada had ignited, leaving behind only faintly scorched wood. "I've seen enough," Naruto remarked. "I'm calling an end to this." Sarada sat on the ground, head between her knees as she thought the repercussions of today. Failure meant, what? Another year at the academy? Dropping out entirely? Neither sounded acceptable to Sarada. So what now? Learning the fireball jutsu, getting her father's approval, it was surreal. She had come too far to fail. She sniffled, trying to hold back the tears that were welling in her eyes. "Hey," Natsuko said, patting Sarada's back. "Don't cry, that's not cool." "Shut up," Sarada retorted. Natsuko flinched, pulling away from her teammate. Sarada glanced at Ronin, who sat apart from her and Natsuko, staring into space with anger in his eyes. Naruto cleared his throat loudly, drawing the attention of the three students. "Well, you three fought well today." "Yeah, right," Sarada heard Ronin whisper to himself. "Not a single one of you managed to grab a bell," Naruto added. "So, after all that, I have to say that all of you passed." Naruto's face broke into a big smile. "Oh man, I've wanted to do that for so long." "We passed." Sarada stared blankly at her sensei. Natsuko threw her hands up in the air and screamed with joy. "We passed, yay." "What do you mean passed?" Ronin asked, confusion obvious in his blank stare. Naruto pulled the bells from his belt. These were never the goal of the test. Natsuko stopped her celebrating. "Huh." Naruto looked at the exuberant girl. "Natsuko, when you thought that only two of you could pass, you volunteered yourself to be the one to fail. You made a hard decision to sacrifice for the sake of the team and made yourself a part of the action." He then turned to the boy of the squad. "Ronin, you put aside your feelings about the other two and worked with them. You let the team be more important than how you felt." At last the Hokage turned to the Uchiha. "Sarada, you let your skills work for the team, letting yourself just become part of the group. And when things went wrong you took Natsuko and kept trying, for both your sake and hers." Sarada tilted her head. "Naruto-sensei, I still don't get it." Naruto tucked the bells into his pocket. "The bells were never about that. You probably weren't going to get them even if you had worked as a team from the get-go. The point of this exercise is to know that you joining forces is your best bet in doing so even if one of you might fail." Sarada looked back blankly and it started to click in her head. "I see." Naruto smiled at the three genin. "From this day on, we are Team Naruto." Temari was seated in one of the rooms of Hokage residence. The Hokage, Naruto, her husband, Shikamaru and two of the academy's instructors, Shino and Anko, were sitting across from her on one side of the long table. Temari's eyes darted back and forth between the people sitting in front of her. "You want me to train a genin team?" Naruto took a piece of paper out of a folder. "Yup," he said and handed the sheet to Temari. "We want to place these students with you. Team 4, Temari read from the paper. "Haruto Hyuga, Bolt Uzumaki, and Tora Yamato. All have decent to great marks. A Hyuga, the son of the Hokage, and some girl I know nothing about." "Why me?" "They all have," began Shino, "what you might call conduct issues." Temari raised one eyebrow at that one. "In what way?" "Let's begin with Haruto," Anko said. "Talented, second in the class. But he's a son of bitch, as arrogant as you'll find." "He's talented and thinks he's better than everybody else," Temari shrugged. "So what? Not odd." Shino folded his hands together. "His ego is even bigger than that." "Why?" "Because he is second in line to be the head of the Hyuga clan." "What?" Temari said. "How?" Shikamaru sat back in his chair. "The Hyuga clan has a law that the head of family must both have the Byakugan and not be branded with the cursed mark jutsu. Since the Byakugan is only passed down the male line, any children Hanabi Hyuga has will likely not be able to inherit the clan. Haruto was the first child born into the clan after the Hyuga Reformation Act, meaning he doesn't have the cursed mark and is set to inherit the clan from Hanabi." Shino nodded. "That is true, it has given him a sense of entitlement." "I see," Temari replied gazing at the picture of Haruto on the assignment sheet. "What about the other two?" "Bolt's a prankster, but that isn't much of a problem." Naruto shut his eyes. "My son is crying out for attention, he'll do all kinds of crazy things just to get people to look at him. That's not a good thing to have, I can tell you that from personal experience." Temari nodded her head. "And Tora, I don't know anything about her." "Tora's got ability, more than her grades show," Shino said. She probably has the best chakra control out of anyone in the class, save for the Hyugas, because they naturally lean towards that. However, added Anko, she's got a hair-trigger temper and a rage like a volcano. If she's going to succeed as a ninja, she's going to need to learn how to control that. Temari glanced at the team roster again. I see, it occurred to her suddenly. Why do you give me this team? Naruto shrugged. Shikamaru thought maybe you could discipline them, get them in line. Shikamaru laughed nervously. It was a legitimate suggestion for the best solution. Honest. Temari looked at her husband for a moment, then decided to let it slide. All right, I'll do it. Come to the academy tomorrow morning at 9, then, Naruto said with a smile. There you will meet your team. The next day, you will put them to the test with your design, which we will all review 3 days from now. Dismissed. Temari stood up from her chair. Understood, she said, bowing. Then she turned and left the room. Temari walked through the Hokage residence and realized that she had no idea what kind of test she could put her squad through. And when she got to the waiting area outside the building, she sat herself down and began to think about the possibilities. She sat there for a while, and then she saw somebody else coming through. Yeah, Lee. Rock Lee halted and waved at her. Oh, hello Temari. You also have a genin squad. Yeah, Temari said, but I don't know how to test them. What do you have planned? Lee gave himself a thumbs up, and he was proud of himself. I'm about to give the same test that Guy-sensei gave my team when we became genin. A variation of the bell test, where you have to keep pursuing the bells until they are retrieved, no matter how difficult that may seem. Once we proved that we would not stop until we succeeded, we passed. The taijutsu master got a quizzical look from Temari. The bell test, what's that about? Lee waved Temari off as he began to walk away. Sorry, I have to go. Please forgive me. After that episode, Temari started to head home, still thinking about what her test should be. She reached her destination and lay down on the couch in the living room, her mind going through the possibilities and finding none satisfactory. Before she could continue her thoughts, Shikamaru entered the room. What, you're home already? Temari asked, glancing up at her husband. Shikamaru fell silent for a moment, studying his wife. Taking a test in mind. Temari nodded in agreement. Yeah, quick question though, what's the bell test? I spoke with Lee a little bit and he brought it up. The bell test. Shikamaru repeated. It's a test popular in the village. Many Jonin like to use variations of it to try out genin teams. It always involves the genin trying to get a set of bells from the Jonin. But that masks the true point of the test. Generally the Jonin wants to see if the team can work together, come up with coherent strategies, or can keep trying even if it seems impossible, something like that. Temari sat up straight. I see, you took that test. Shikamaru nodded in agreement. I did. The Ino-Shika-Cho trio is a team dynamic that stretches back generations with well-defined capabilities, so Asuma-sensei used it, tested how well we could adapt to changing circumstances. Okay, Temari said, you gave the bell test to Mirai's team. Shikamaru sat in one of the room's armchairs. No, I decided to buck the trend a bit. I played shogi with them, with the 3 of them working in cooperation against me. I wanted to see how their minds worked, see if they could develop strategies without bickering. Temari shut her eyes in thought. Maybe I can work something out of that. You're from the Sand Village, Shikamaru said. Maybe you could work that in. Yes, Temari answered, but now I am also of the Leaf. Temari's eyes widened as an idea finally occurred to her. That's it. Oh, said Shikamaru, got something. Temari rose and kissed her husband on the cheek. Yes, she shouted, running off to another room to prepare for the test. It was early the next morning, and Temari was walking into the academy to meet her team. She had worked out the details of her test and looked forward to the implementation of it. All that was left was to meet her students face to face. In the entrance hall, Shino greeted her. I hope I'm not the last one here, Temari said. Not even close, Shino replied. You're the 6th to arrive. Shino took Temari to the classroom where the genin were gathered and ushered her inside. Stepping in, Temari saw 15 eager young shinobi all looking at her. She looked around the room and saw that her son was not there, which meant his team must have already left. Team 4, Temari yelled. Haruto Hyuga, Bolt Uzumaki, Tori Yamato, you're coming with me. She left the room without waiting for her team to assemble, and her charges hurried after her as she moved down the hall. They followed her as she walked toward the roof. She walked out onto the academy's outdoor observation platform, sat down on the railing and waited for her team to take their seats on the steps around her. Tamari looked to her team, watching them before she spoke. Talk to me about yourselves. First thing you should do is introduce yourself, Sensei, Bolt said. Tamari shrugged. Why not? I'm Tamari, your Jonin Sensei. Bolt looked at her like he wanted more. That's it. That's not an intro. Shut up, you idiot, Haruto said. Bolt glanced at his new teammate. What was that, cousin? Haruto looked straight into Bolt's face. Don't you talk to me like we're on the same level. Enough you two, Tamari said. Why don't you tell us who you are? Haruto and Bolt broke their deadlock, the latter taking the opportunity to speak. I'm Bolt Uzumaki. I want to be a great ninja for myself, not for my father. I'm Tora Yamato. I just want to do my best. My name is Haruto Hyuga and I just hope these two don't slow me down. Tora stood before the Hyuga, the anger on her face. What was that? She swung a fist at Haruto, who blocked it easily. Thoroughly ticked off by this, Tamari grabbed her fan from her back and smacked both the genin over the head with it. No team killing. But sensei, Tora started. Tamari raised her hand. Enough. She put away her fan and cleared her throat. There's a test tomorrow that you have to pass to become a genin. Meet me at noon tomorrow at Training Ground 5 for it. Tamari waved her hand and disappeared in a gust of wind. She left her team to fend for themselves. Tamari was sitting watching her team gather in Training Ground 5. It was just before noon and the hour was drawing near. Tamari smirked to herself and sprinted at great speed to suddenly appear between her students, announcing her arrival with a blast of wind that buffeted the young upstart shinobi. Ah, sensei, Bolt grumbled. Was that really needed? Good, you're here. It's time to begin your test. Tamari said, ignoring the question. She turned and strode off into the woods, her team running after her. They walked a short distance to a small, out-of-the-way clearing. This is where your test will be, Tamari said, turning to face her students. Nothing here, Haruto commented. Tamari smiled. Oh, is there now? Tamari pulled out a scroll, placed it on the ground, and began applying her chakra to the seal within. There was a flash and a puff of smoke. Suddenly a big bell appeared. The purpose of this test is to ring this bell, said Tamari, standing between her students and their goal. Ring the bell, Haruto asked, looking at his sensei like she was nuts. That's not all. Tamari giggled. Of course not. You have to get past me to do it. One more thing though, you can only try it one at a time. If you can't get past me on your own then you don't deserve to be shinobi. Then why are we being tested as a team, not individually? Bolt asked, his eyes narrowing suspiciously. The leaf might care about you working as a team, Tamari said, showing a grin full of teeth. But I don't. I'm of the sand and we only care about how you do as individuals. Tamari took her fan and prepared herself. Come, let us see if you are worthy of being shinobi. Haruto was the first to volunteer. Watch and learn, he said, activating his Byakugan and rushing at Tamari. The sand kunoichi smirked and waved her fan, creating a gust of wind that blew the Hyuga off his feet and back. A trio of shuriken flew towards Tamari from behind the falling form of Haruto. Oh, using your beaten teammate as a shield, the Jonin said, deflecting the projectiles with her fan. Just what I'd expect from a trickster, Bolt. With a great upward swing she sent a gale into the space above her head, where the Uzumaki was making a flying leap from the nearest tree. The wind pushed him off course, and he was dumped on the ground beside his Hyuga relative. Smart, said Tamari. Maybe that trick will help you get by the next 10-year-old that blocks your path. Tora suddenly came barreling at Tamari with a great cry. The Jonin swung her fan again and created a huge gust of wind to blow her attacker away. But she was surprised when Tora, as she was blown backward scrabbling at the dirt, started to cling to the ground with what could only have been chakra control. How are you doing that? Bolt yelled from the sidelines. I don't know, Tora cried, panicking as she tried to maintain her chakra-created grip. So, you do have some talent, Tamari said, nodding as she silently admired the young ninja's instinctual use of her chakra. Still not enough. Planting her fan in the ground, she exploded into a flurry of hand signs before sending a blast of air into the ground, breaking up the layer of soil underneath Tora. Her grasp undone, there was little the girl could do to save herself from the next blast from Tamari's fan. She was sent flying backwards, landing next to her colleagues. Tora jumped to her feet, giving forth a deep growl that Tamari heard even from where was standing. Goddamn piece of shit, the girl shouted, walking over to the nearest tree. Stupid fucking test, why do you have to be so goddamned hard? Tora began pounding on the tree, cursing under his breath. Bolt jogged over to the girl and appeared to try to calm her. Eventually Haruto joined them, looking to get in an argument with both of them. Are you going to do this or not? Haruko screamed at his teammates. Yeah, Bolt waved off the Hyuga prodigy. I gotta go take a piss though, so you'll have to excuse me for a little bit. The young Uzumaki then vanished behind a tree. Whatever, said Haruto, ignoring Bolt. Tamari watched with a raised brow, wondering why the Hyuga prodigy was acting so nonchalant. Suddenly Haruto started rushing towards her again and the Jonin's thoughts fractured. Again, Tamari blew him back with a wind jutsu. However, just as the winds calmed Tora threw a torrent of kunai as her, causing Tamari to blast out another gust to knock them out of the air. In that instant Tora formed a demon wind shuriken from behind her back, unfolding it and launched it as the wind subsided. Tamari wasn't able to recover fast enough to do another wind jutsu and so she had to block it physically with her fan. She flipped the shuriken off her weapon and it took a wild bounce over Tamari's head, somewhere off behind her. Tamari smirked. Okay, Bolt, you can halt right there. She waved her offhand that was poised to unleash a wind jutsu at the young Uzumaki with a small hand fan she had taken from a side holster. Bolt stood behind her, ready to strike the bell, but he just stared wide-eyed at his sensei. How did you know that? It was clear that you turned into that shuriken. Tamari said. That line about leaving to piss was an obvious ruse and that shuriken was much too big for me not to have seen it before. If I had to guess you had planned it out when you were pretending to argue with Haruto after Tora had started punching the tree. It was a good tactic, but it could have used some refinement. Tamari moved away from her fighting stance and stashed her fans. But it was a plan you three put into action together. You broke one of the rules of this test. Haruto glared at Bolt. I told you, you idiot. A very serious look came to Tamari's face as she began to shake her head. Well, I'm going to have to congratulate you for passing, on the basis of that fact. Fucking great. Tora threw her hands up. That's what you get for listening to. She stopped as the truth hit her, her arms falling back to her sides. Wait, we got through. Tamari beamed. Yes. Bolt scratched the back of his head, looking totally perplexed. But, what was that about being from the sand and judging us as individuals? Back when I was growing up there, that was the philosophy indeed, Tamari admitted. But we have long since abandoned that idea and have adopted the curriculum of the leaf instead. So what was the point of all this? Haruto asked. Tamari brought a hand to her chin. Did you have a reason for this? I dunno, maybe I just like screwing with people. Tora curled her hand into a fist. You're not saying this was some sort of practical joke, are you, sensei? It wasn't, Tamari said. It was designed to see if you could see that the one-on-one restriction was preventing you from succeeding and team up as a consequence. You cannot achieve your mission on your own, no matter how skilled you think you are, and you cannot let the path to victory be defined for you. Got that? The three genin slowly nodded. Tamari grinned. Then you are now Team Tamari. It was many years since Tamari had moved to Hidden Leaf. She'd done it for love, first of all. Then she made friends and got a family. Now she had her own pupils. She knew that the longer you stayed in a place like this, the deeper the connections grew. Hinata was reading in bed, late at night. Naruto's entrance into the bedroom broke her concentration on the book. That sounds like a successful day of survival tests, she said. Oh, said Naruto, you heard about that. Yeah, Bolt wouldn't shut up about it, Hinata said, setting her book down on her nightstand. Putting him with Tamari was an interesting choice, he appears to like her. Naruto went to lay on the bed next to his wife. Yes, it is not quite official yet, but it looks like we have our 4 teams selected. Teams Tamari, Lee, Konohamaru, and Naruto will start in the next couple of days. Team Naruto, Hinata asked. You fought a genin team. Naruto closed his eyes, nodding. Yeah, I figured it was time. Hinata turned around and looked at Naruto. Why, we already discussed how you don't spend enough time with the family. Why add to your responsibilities? I wanted to teach Sarada, Naruto explained, squirming a bit to get into a more comfortable position. Hinata sat up in the bed. Sarada, if you were going to take a squad, why didn't you take Bolt's? Naruto opened an eye and looked at his wife. First, what would it be like if I took over a squad with my own son in it? Favoritism. More importantly, I made a promise. A promise, said Hinata. What promise? To who? Naruto rolled over onto his side, his back to Hinata. On the day Sarada was born, Sasuke asked me to make a promise to him. He wanted me to look after her and teach her. Hinata's eyes widened. She knew what this was all about. I see. I still don't agree with your decision, but, Hinata laid a hand on her husband's shoulder, I know how important keeping promises is to you. I'll support you all the way. Thank you, honey, Naruto said. Hinata hugged her husband from behind and cuddled up against his shoulder. They lay there like that until they went to sleep. Neji was close to home, the village hidden in the leaves, for the first time since he was reanimated. He and Askia had left the hidden rain a few days ago and headed south into the land of rivers to meet up with another agent, a ninja from the hidden sand. After the rendezvous, the three went into the land of fire, using Neji's Byakugan to avoid leaf patrols, on more than one occasion going miles out of their way to avoid detection. However else you could say about Askia, he was careful. Now they were on the outskirts of the village, close enough to see the village in the distance, but not close enough to be detected by the barriers maintained around the area. Neji sat atop a rock formation, his Byakugan activated, looking down at his home as the moonless night reached its darkest point. The Hyuga was joined by Askia, who sat down next to him. Looks the same as you remember. Neji shut off his Byakugan. Some of it looks the same, even from before Pain's assault. Other parts seem to be new development, especially around what used to be the outskirts of the village. I don't think I've ever seen buildings this tall. Askia took out a canteen of water and took a sip. Yes, it's amazing how fast technology progresses and how rich we become in times of peace. That's why we must work carefully to keep it. Askia held the canteen out to Neji, offering it to him. Neji looked suspiciously at the canteen and then up at Askia again. Seriously? Askia said, eyes widening in recognition, slapping his forehead. Oh, what a fool I am. Sorry. Hey, when are we doing this? Yelled their sand compatriot behind them. Askia put the canteen down and stood up. Gather round, now's a good time. Neji and the sand ninja walked up next to Askia, who began the mission briefing. We are in the hidden leaf for one reason and one reason only. By the master's orders, we are to. Askia grimaced as he struggled to say the words, kidnap Himawari Uzumaki. The sand ninja smiled and laughed. Good, that bitch of a leaf princess gets what she deserves. Neji didn't react outwardly, but inside he cursed his luck and begged any listening gods to let him strike the two men standing next to him down. Infiltrate the village and get the girl, Askia continued. At all costs, avoid detection and contact with leaf shinobi. They should not know what we have done until we are already gone, and they should have no idea who did it. The sand ninja nodded his head. Works for me. Neji said nothing and did nothing. Askia placed his hands on the shoulders of the sand ninja and Neji. Hyuga, keep those eyes of yours ready, we need to know of anyone within detection range of us. As soon the rain shinobi said that Neji's Byakugan involuntarily activated. Askia pulled all three of them into the earth. He felt himself sink into the ground. In an instant they were under the village. Neji could see with his Byakugan that they were close to the Hokage residence. Askia then brought them out into the open in an alley behind the building. Askia looked at Neji. Anybody about? Neji shook his head. No, we appear to be alone. We shouldn't be seen by the guards if we keep away from the entrance. Askia nodded his head. Then find the room that Himawari is in. We climb in through a window and out the same way. Go ahead. Neji issued his orders, then took off towards the building, quietly coming up underneath the window to the room where Himawari was sleeping a few floors above them. At a signal from Askia they climbed to the window and entered the building. The child was sleeping in her bed, dreaming quietly. Neji just wanted to leave her be, but he knew that wouldn't be allowed. Askia gestured to the sand ninja to take the child, and then he crept up beside the bed. But as he was doing, Neji sensed a presence in the hall outside. The rain Jonin slid to the side of the door, letting Askia know that, but for reasons unknown, he didn't tell the sand ninja about it. The door swung open and a man Neji recognized as Genma Shiranui stepped in. Genma saw the sand ninja standing over Himawari and they both paused, staring at each other for a moment. In an instant they both reached for weapons, but Genma was faster. Spitting out the senbon that he always kept in his mouth, Genma struck the sand ninja in the neck, cutting one of the main arteries there. Askia came out from behind the door and hit Genma in the back of the head. Genma went unconscious. The sand ninja fell to the floor and started bleeding out. Askia then went over to the still sleeping Himawari and, with a tenderness that could have made you forget he was kidnapping the girl, picked her up. He put his hand on Neji's shoulder and led him to the window. They jumped out together, and as they hit the ground they submerged into the earth. Askia hurried them back out of the village. Neji came out of the ground at where they had originally started and looked to Askia, who still had a sleeping Himawari. "Why did you let him die?" Neji whispered. "'Twas the master's orders," said Askia. "If that leaf shinobi hadn't done it I would've. He was meant to die on this mission from the start." Neji's eyes went wide in realization. "You want the leaf to believe the sand did the kidnapping?" Askia said nothing, just stared back at the Hyuga undead. "Now what?" Neji said, after a moment of awkward silence. "Go back to the hidden rain, and give up Himawari to your master." Askia shook his head. "No, we take her to a safe house here in the land of fire. The master will meet us there. Besides, I don't have the energy to travel too far at the moment." "I see," Neji said, "that earth jutsu you used to get us into the village. It must use a lot of chakra, especially when you have to extend its effects over multiple people." Askia refused to answer and simply walked away from Neji. After a few steps he looked back at the Hyuga over his shoulder. "Follow me." Neji sighed, his body obeying him, following Askia out of the village. Neji knew this would have bigger political repercussions, but he didn't see it that way. In his mind, it had become very personal family matter the moment they targeted his family, even one that he had never known. Shikamaru looked at the reports in his hand and yawned. It was early morning and he had just gotten to work. Naruto sat down at his desk. "So what's the status right now, Shikamaru?" "Well, the academy graduation is over," Shikamaru said. "Teams Tamari, Lee, Konohamaru and Naruto ready to begin." Naruto sat back in his seat. "Right, missions." Shikamaru flipped a few more papers. "We haven't had any requests for anything above AC rank." "What about the mission to the hidden sound?" Naruto asked. Shikamaru pulled a sheet of paper from the stack he was carrying and placed it on the desk before Naruto. "Here is the transcript of the last message from Ino. They should be back today or tomorrow providing a formal report." Naruto took the paper and looked. "Let's go over everything they've uncovered." "They say that the Sound Village is completely gone," Shikamaru said, "but the casualties are surprisingly low. Most of the civilian population, along with the majority of the village's military, were discovered in hidden bunkers outside the village." Naruto nodded. "I remember. Sounds like a successful evacuation." Shikamaru flipped the page. The eyewitness testimony coupled with the crater-like patterns in the village ruins have brought them to the conclusion that whoever attacked the sound was using the almighty push jutsu, which can only be done with the Rinnegan. Naruto spun a quarter in his chair and leaned his head back. "Rinnegan, huh? If they have it then they are a dangerous enemy. Plus," Shikamaru began again, "they've put together profiles on the two enemy shinobi they met at the final valley, to be entered into the bingo book." Naruto looked at his advisor again. "I remember them saying they fought somebody. Who were they?" Shikamaru picked up another piece of paper from his little stack, a draft for a page in the bingo book. "First we have this guy. Name is Tadashi, A-rank criminal, affiliation unknown. Has a high degree of skill with lighting style jutsu and ability with water style. At least Jonin level in ability, approach with caution. Has an extreme degree of confidence in his own power. Wanted for involvement in the attack on the village hidden in the sound. We have no confirmed picture of the man." Shikamaru put the bingo book entry down on the desk and pulled another for the stack. "Another guy we don't have a picture of. Askia, A-rank, unknown affiliation. Has displayed mastery of earth-style jutsu and a high degree of skill in stealth. Jonin level, if not higher, approach with caution. Wanted for involvement in the attack on the village hidden in the sound and as a suspect in the Neji Hyuga grave robbing incident." Shikamaru put the paper down on Naruto's desk. Naruto looked at the two profiles. "You think this guy is the grave robber?" Shikamaru rubbed at his chin. "It's possible. He fits the profile, but there's really no way to be sure." Said Naruto. "What about that mission to the hidden rain?" Shikamaru flipped through another set of reports. "Sasuke should meet up with Sai and Yamato sometime today and then come to the staging point tomorrow." Naruto nodded his head. "Okay, then." Naruto was distracted by the noise of a great commotion coming from the hallway before either Naruto or Shikamaru could try to figure out what was going on out there. The door burst open and Genma and Shizune ran into the room. "Lord Hokage," called Genma, "I am so sorry. Naruto stood. Sorry. What do you mean? Genma straightened his spine, composing himself. Sorry, but Himawari, your daughter, she's been taken. Shikamaru's eyes widened in surprise. Kidnapped? What do you mean? How? Naruto, we can try to form a search team, Shizune offered. Huh? Shikamaru turned to see the Hokage standing still with his eyes closed. After a moment the area around Naruto's eyes turned orange as he entered sage mode. I don't sense her chakra, Naruto said, pain evident on his face. Either someone is hiding her presence extremely well or they've already moved her out of my range. Naruto suddenly turned and punched the window behind him, shattering it into tiny shards of glass. Tell me what happened, he said between angry grunts. Genma grimaced as he began recounting his tale. Sir, I was on duty last night when I sensed a presence coming from Himawari's bedroom. I went to investigate and I found a man preparing to take her. I was able to kill him, but another one must have come behind and knocked me out. I'm sorry, sir. Naruto, Shizune said, the man that Captain Genma killed, he was from the Sand Village. Naruto looked over his shoulder at Shizune. The Sand Village. Shikamaru was shocked by this revelation. But why would the Sand kidnap Himawari? I intend to find out. There was a sudden burst of light as everyone in the room attempted to shield their eyes. For one crazy moment Shikamaru thought that he had just witnessed a case of spontaneous human combustion, that Naruto had just burst into flame. He quickly realized that was insane and lowered his hand to see Naruto in his Nine Tails chakra mode. Naruto, what are you? Shikamaru yelled, just as the Hokage suddenly disappeared. Where did he go? Genma exclaimed. Shikamaru strode behind the desk and looked out the broken window. I think he's going to the hidden sand. Shizune moved to the window next to him. Why would he do that? God, I hope he's not going to confront the Cage over this or worse, attack the sand in revenge. Shikamaru shook his head. I don't know, but I'm afraid he's going to do something dramatic. Gaara sat in the council room, silent as his advisors and village council members spoke about the current state of the village. The village finances are safe and there is a steady stream of missions coming in, one council member said. Another nodded in assent. Yes, we have managed to find a good balance of military expenditure and income. Another council member stood up. A good balance between military expenditure and income. Is that what we call it? All we are doing is hampering our shinobi forces, limiting our preparation for times of war. Baki sat beside Gaara on his right, and said, we're not risking the safety of the village, Isamu. The world is at peace, and every nation is reducing their military strength. It's not as necessary as it once was. Isamu scoffed at this. Peace? How long do you think it will last? We must prepare for war. What war, Isamu? Asked another council member. Who would we fight? With whom has our relationship deteriorated that far? Defeated, Isamu sat back in his seat, sulking. Another council member stood. The preparations for this year's Chunin exams, to be hosted here in the sand, are on schedule and on budget. In fact, the new stadium for the final rounds is well ahead of schedule. A more elderly council member nodded. Good, good. These exams are a good opportunity to show our continued strength to the world and potential clients. It will also allow us to maintain our good relations with the other 5 great shinobi nations. Not to mention the income we will get from tourism during the final rounds. Good, Baki said, now on to matters of village security. What of the joint mission with the stone and leaf into the hidden rain? One of the council asked. Lord Cage sent Konkuro to represent us on the mission, Baki responded. He left earlier in the week and should arrive at the staging point tomorrow. The council member rubbed his chin in thought. Konkuro is skilled, to be sure, but only one man. Shouldn't we have sent more? Konkuro will be more than enough, Gaara responded. I trust him. After a moment of silence the council member bowed his head. Then I'll respect your judgment, Lord Cage. Out of the corner of his eye Gaara saw a man hand a report to Isamu, who stood up as he began reading it. My fellow members of the council, Lord Cage, the council member began. I have just received news on one of our patrols near the land of rivers that has been missing for some time now. Baki leaned back in his seat. Ah, were they finally found? Good. They were found all right, Isamu continued. Dead, all of them. Everyone in the chamber sprang to their feet, save for Gaara. Dead, how could this happen? One council member exclaimed. Do we have any idea who did it? Anther yelled. Isamu raised his hand. signaling the council for silence, and the room became quiet. Preliminary reports from the autopsy are in. All 4 members of the patrol were killed by Rasengan. Rasengan. But how? One council member asked. Isamu banged his hand on the table. Friends, it is obvious what must be done. Declare war on the village hidden in the leaves. Baki scoffed at the notion. Gaara closed his eyes. Declare war. Are you mad? There are only 3 living people in the world that know the Rasengan, Isamu said. All of them are from the hidden leaf. It's clear they are the ones behind it. Baki lowered his hand on the table. You would throw away all that we have accomplished, the peace that we have worked so hard for, based on some supposition. Isamu is right, this crime demands an act of war, yelled a younger member of the council. Gaara opened his eyes. I shall not make war for this village. Gaara said it softly, but everyone in the council chamber heard it and fell silent before slumping back into their seats. Except Isamu. Isamu glared at his cage, anger clear on his face. You only refuse to go to war because you are friends with the Hokage. He pointed at Gaara. The love you have for Naruto Uzumaki outweighs your loyalty to the village. Several members of the council gasped and murmured at the accusation. They all fell silent, however, when Gaara stood. Giving Isamu a death glare, Gaara spoke. I am the cage. I will never let this village come to harm, no matter the cost. Never question my loyalty to my people. Isamu glared at the cage. Before he could respond, however, another member of the council interceded. We are not questioning your resolve to protect the village, my lord, but this is suspicious to say the least. We must launch an investigation, at the very minimum make an inquiry to the Leaf Village. Gaara was about to respond when he felt a presence entering the village. His eyes widened as he realized who it was. Looks like we'll be doing that sooner than you thought. Several of the council members exchanged confused glances. They were all surprised, however, when Gaara disappeared from the room in a cloud of sand. Gaara arrived on the roof of the cage residence. Creating a floating ring of sand around himself, he looked at the intruder. Naruto, I'm surprised to see you here. Standing across from Gaara was Naruto, wearing the cloak of his Nine Tails chakra mode. I came here for answers, Gaara. Answers? Huh, Gaara responded. Are you here to give them or to receive them? Naruto's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? We just received a report on one of our patrols, Gaara answered. They were all killed by someone using the Rasengan. Naruto stared back at Gaara. We didn't do it. Gaara looked into Naruto's eyes. I believe you. You're telling the truth. I've answered your question, Naruto said, now you answer mine. What do you know of the kidnapping of my daughter? Gaara's eyes widened in genuine surprise. Himawari has been kidnapped. I'm guessing you didn't do it then, Naruto replied. Why, Naruto? Gaara asked, would you think that I know something about that? One of the men that was part of the kidnapping was killed, Naruto said. He was a sand shinobi. Gaara shook his head. If anyone from the sand was involved in this, they did so without my knowledge or permission. Naruto relaxed his stance. I believe you, Gaara. Naruto, Gaara said, before you leave. The kidnapping of Himawari, the murder of my men, there will be people on both sides calling for war and we may not be able to stop it. Naruto made a half turn as he prepared to leave. I know. Something else, the cage added, of all the shinobi nations none are closer than ours. If we were to go to war, the peace we fought so hard for will crumble to dust. I know that too, the Hokage said before disappearing. Using the ambient sand floating in the village, Gaara tracked Naruto as he left, heading back towards the leaf. Was that the Hokage? Baki asked as he appeared on the roof behind Gaara. Gaara nodded. Yes. Baki walked up next to him. And, Gaara looked at his former teacher. I think we are being forced into an unwanted war.